Hey guys, tonight we slip the cord of the present and drift into the oldest quiet. A quiet so complete it makes your bedroom fan sound like a hurricane. You float where there is no up or down, only the soft black doorway of space. There is no breeze, no birds, no buzzing refrigerator. There isn't even darkness the way you know it, because there are not yet eyes to notice. There is simply a hush you can feel in your ribs. You are going somewhere so far back that your favorite pillow has not been woven, your street has not been paved, and yes, you probably won't survive this. But don't worry, it's only a story, and you're already tucked in. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing the map of all of us glow. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin as dust, not the kind hiding under your dresser, although respectfully that colony is thriving, but stardust, calcium for your bones, iron for your blood, carbon for your soft tissues, all forged long before Earth exists. In an older generation of stars, atoms fuse under immense pressure, knitting simple elements into heavy ones. When those stars end their lives, some collapse in silence, some detonate in supernova, and the elements scatter like glitter from a shaken jar. Mainstream fact: the iron coursing through you was born in stellar furnaces and thrown across space by dying suns. That is not poetry. That is chemistry with flair. For a time beyond counting, your atoms drift. Imagine the patience of a speck, turning in a vast, slow carousel of a cold molecular cloud. Here and there, eddies gather, like lazy whirlpools in a dark river. Gravity hums a low note. You sense other grains turning toward you, a mutual leaning in. Astronomers still argue whether a nearby supernova's shock wave nudges this cloud into collapse, or whether gravity simply wins a long arm-wrestling match with turbulence. Either way, the cloud bows inward. Picture a long, quiet inhalation, and with it, you are taken in. As the cloud shrinks, it flattens into a disk, thin as a thought, wide as a family of worlds. At the center, the pressure becomes unbearable. Hydrogen, pressed close enough to whisper, begins to fuse. A star is not born with a bang so much as with a glow. Your sun kindles, first warmth, first light in your story. It is plump and young, wrapped in a veil of dust, flaring as it settles its temper. Not a furious tyrant, but a steady hearth come to life. You feel its warmth like a hand on your shoulder, saying, "Okay, now we can begin." Out in the disk, you are still dust. But now you are attention-seeking dust. Static charges make grains cling, first shyly, then with confidence, as if the universe has discovered the joy of making mud pies. Pebbles meet pebbles, and cafe-sized stones emerge, skittering in concentric lanes, occasionally bumping, occasionally sticking. Each collision is a negotiation. Most are fender benders, some are mergers, some are tragic flings apart. It's cosmic kindergarten. Everyone's learning to share mass. When enough clumps grow, their tiny gravities give them social pull. They vacuum the neighborhood with all the subtlety of a toddler with a new toy. You, as 1,000, then 1,000,000, then 1,000,000,000,000 parts, become a few larger bodies, planetesimals, foreshadowings of worlds. Here's a quirky tidbit to keep under your pillow. Hidden inside certain meteorites on modern Earth are tiny pre-solar grains, microscopic crystals older than the sun itself, little time capsules that survived the dust brawl. When scientists find them, it's like discovering crumbs from the kitchen that baked you, baked before the kitchen was even built. They carry isotopic quirks, fingerprints of long-gone stars, reminding you that your passport stamps start before your solar system had customs. Closer to the sun, the newborn wind clears fog from the room, blowing lighter gases outward and leaving behind a rocky pantry. Farther out, ices stockpile. Within these zones, the recipe differs. Inside, stone and metal dominate. Outside, ice and gas throw a party, and don't invite friction. You, destined for a temperate orbit, keep circling inside the stony realm. As bodies grow, they heat, by collisions, by compression, by the decay of short-lived radioactive isotopes. Fringe-leaning tidbit. Some researchers point to a burst of aluminum-26 in early solar leftovers, perhaps injected by a nearby star, as a key hand-warmer for the forming planets. The bigger a body gets, the more it can round itself into a sphere and bully little rocks with its gravity. Cosmic real estate has begun. Location, location, hill sphere. Time in this nursery is gentle but relentless. Millions of years pass like breaths. The sun sheds its shroud and begins to shine clear. The disk thins like fog lifting from a lake. You, having practiced sticking for eons, are now medium-sized, far shy of a planet, but big enough to feel collisions as events rather than weather. Sometimes you are the hammer, sometimes you are the nail. If you're wondering whether this stage is relaxing, imagine napping in a slow-motion gravel storm. Still, compared to rush-hour traffic on your commute, it's practically spa music. The rules of this construction are simple. Conserve momentum, conserve energy, and keep going. Every merger is a roll of the dice. Angles, speeds, materials. Some impacts melt your surface. Some strip your crust. Some bring water-bearing minerals. Others deliver metal that dives, molten, toward your center. You are a mosaic of many places, each collision a footnote written in heat. Over time, you drift into a stable lane, shepherded by the newborn gravitational personalities of your neighbors. The heavyweight bullies, Proto-Jupiter and Proto-Saturn, jostle the outer disk, pitch comets inward, and clear wide swaths like toddlers dragging blankets through a neat room. Down where you orbit, there is a very slow crescendo. You accrete into a protoplanet, then into what will one day be called Earth. Not a blue marble yet, more a charcoal ember wrapped in gas. You are still not standing on it, you are it. You are the grit, iron, silicates, carbon compounds, nickel drops, all settling into layers like a cake that learned geology. The center squeezes into a metallic heart. The outside crackles with heat. If you could take a selfie, wide-angle lens recommended, you would be a glowing sphere under a dusky, dusty sky, ringed by the faint traffic of leftover stones. Meanwhile, the sun keeps growing calmer, less tantrum, more metronome. Light leaks through the thinning dust, and shadows gain edges. In the next breath of geologic time, a dramatic meeting is scheduled. Another body on a crossing orbit, a slow dance you cannot refuse. But for now, in this first chapter, settle into the rhythm of small things becoming large. Countless taps on your surface, the whisper of particles landing, the warm hush of a star nearby, young but dependable. Somewhere in this lullaby of impacts, the future moon is already a rumor, the future ocean already a plan, and the future you already a promise carried in atoms that have traveled farther than any traveler with a rolling suitcase. If the thought of being assembled from collisions makes sleep harder, here's a softer truth. Construction, on cosmic scales, is just persistence with gravity. You are not a mistake of chaos. You are what happens when patience gets mass. And if you are tempted to ask, are we there yet? Well, in cosmic terms, we haven't even left the driveway. But you're doing great. Keep breathing. Keep drifting. The light ahead is yours. Heat swells in your belly. The pebbles that became boulders have melted into one another. And now you are a newborn planet, glowing like a banked coal. Your surface is a restless scab of basalt. Black rafts crack, sink, and are poured over again by rivers of orange rock. The sky presses close, soot, steam, and the breath of stone, like a low tent you can't quite stand up in. You are cradled, yes, but the cradle is made of lava that folds and sighs. If a spa advertised hot stone therapy at these temperatures, the waiver would be several pages long. You turn quickly. Days are short, as if you're trying to spin past the awkward phase. Each rotation sloshes your molten insides and separates heavy from light. Iron and nickel drip downward like rain in reverse, pooling into a core that will hum with electrical currents and throw a magnetic cloak around you. Mainstream fact: Earth's metallic core generates a magnetosphere that will shield your future surface from much of the sun's charged particle weather. You don't feel safer yet, but the blueprint for safety is already glowing at your center. Above, the young sun brightens, and gravel still patrols your orbit. The lullaby of small taps gives way to rarer, heavier footfalls. On one long afternoon of geologic time, a fellow traveler approaches, comparable to Mars, quiet, stately, on a path that crosses your own. You and this body do not smash so much as merge. Gravity is a slow choreographer. The impact, call your partner Thea, lifts a splash of incandescent rock wider than continents. Vapor and droplets arc into a bright ring around you, a glittering scarf of your own material returning for one last dance. The ring cools, chunks collect, grow, and sweep the lane clean. Soon a single orb rounds itself, your moon, appearing in the sky enormous and close, rosy with leftover heat. You feel the tug in your very mantle. Tides run not just through the ocean you don't yet have, but through the rock itself, a slow breathing that pulls and releases the planet. Nights, such as they are beneath the clouds, are silver with a copper blush. The moon hangs like a lantern held at arm's length by a patient friend who promises not to drop it, even if your gravity begs to differ. You lean now, about 23 degrees off straight, an elegant slouch you'll keep for ages. Seasons are born from that tilt, more poetry than punishment. Later it will braid variety into climates and migrations and harvests. The impact also stokes your interior, remelting portions of the mantle, stirring metals toward the center and volatiles toward the surface. Outgassing thickens the air, carbon dioxide, water vapor, nitrogen, a hint of sulfur. You are a forge, but a forge with plans for weather. You might picture chaos, but the aftermath has its own order. The moon's gravity acts as a brake, tiny amounts each day, like a hand on a whirling top. Tides knead your crust, heat leaks into space. The rain of debris slackens as the solar system tidies up. Your basins harden, your peaks slump, and your magma ocean scums over with a young crust that barely counts as land. In that dim glow, the first raindrops are rehearsing above you, trapped in steam that will one day condense. But tonight, the air is still thick and warm, and the clouds glow from below like a city seen through curtains. Scientists still argue whether the moon formed from one colossal impact or from a series of large blows that collectively made a disk of debris, whether Theia was a single dance partner or a chorus line over millions of years. Others debate a wilder choreography, a vaporized synestia, a donut-shaped cloud of rock that briefly became your whole identity, out of which both Earth and Moon condensed. Fringe? Perhaps. But the chemistry in lunar samples, so eerily similar to Earth's mantle, keeps the conversation lively. Historians still argue whether a single crown or a council ruled some ancient cities. Planetary scientists are doing the same thing here, peering at clues and cheerfully not agreeing. You stand, or rather you convect, in your heat. Volcanoes are not yet tidy cones. They are global moods. The crust wrinkles, breaks, welds, and breaks again. The air is orange-brown with light scattered by dust and molecules that would make your future lungs file a formal complaint. Lightning forks through the murk, discharging the planet's static like the sky's version of nervous laughter. Occasionally a leftover planetesimal plunges in, adding its metals, its ices, its momentum, and its opinion about where your crust should be. Here's a quirky morsel to slip under the pillow. Some models suggest shards of Theia may still be inside you, deep mantle regions with odd seismic properties, dense blobs beneath Africa and the Pacific. If true, you are literally carrying pieces of your old dance partner, a keepsake held so close you can't take it off. Romantic, in a geological way. Another aside, your day right after the impact may have lasted only 5 or 6 hours. If you like sunsets, imagine getting 2 or 3 sets of them during your commute. On the plus side, birthdays would arrive so fast you'd lose track after a week. Mainstream fact to keep beside you: the tilt that seasons you likely dates to that moon-making collision, and the core whose embrace you felt earlier will keep the magnetic field alive for billions of years, deflecting solar wind and helping you hold on to an atmosphere. Without that, your story might have ended as a dry, stripped husk. Mars, smaller and quicker to cool, offers a cautionary bedtime story on the nightstand, one with lovely sunsets and a disappointing lack of beaches. There is tenderness even in this furnace. Picture the moon drawing slowly away, centimeters per year, like a roommate politely giving you space. Its phases will later become the metronome for tides and myths and calendars. For now, it simply hangs there, large and intimate, carving bright paths through the cloud deck. The surface beneath that light is a quilt of cooling flows, some black and glassy, some red and slow. When a crust forms thick enough to float, it rides a sea of fire like ice. Plates? Not yet, but you can feel the planet rehearsing the steps. You keep leaning and breathing. The moon's tug rings your interior, the sun's light teases energy from your skin, and space drinks your heat without complaint. The greenhouse thickens and then steadies into a hazy ceiling. If you stand in the wind, again, hypothetical lungs, you taste acid, ash, and a hint of metal. The horizon is close because the air is dense. The colors are copper and charcoal. It is beautiful the way a forge is beautiful, purposefully hot, disciplined, waiting for the first cooling breath. You're assembling gifts you'll need later. spin moderated, shield wound, companion placed at the perfect distance to steady your seasons and stir your tides. You are a survivor already. You have been struck hard enough to make a moon and lucky enough to keep one. You spin, you lean, you breathe out. The magnetism coiled inside your core is practice for a shield. The moon circling outside is practice for rhythm. If the room feels warm, exhale with the planet. The breath is long and slow. This phase will pass, and with it will come the soft percussion of rain, the first ocean's steam, and the next chapter in which heat gives way to water and the world trades glow for shimmer. Until then, let the lantern of the moon watch you drowse. Your nights are shorter than a season of your favorite show, your days a blur, your sky a crowded ceiling. But the cradle rocks, and though it is made of stone, the motion is gentle. You are gathering yourself. Mass, heat, a companion and a tilt, like a sleeper pulling up the covers. Soon comes the sound of rain. You hear it before you see it, a long hiss, like a kettle that forgot to stop, then the soft stippling of drops meeting hot stone. The crust that skimmed across your molten skin, thin as a thought, fragile as a sugar glaze, has cooled enough to hold a rhythm, and the first rain falls. The air is swollen with steam breathed out by the planet. Every cloud is a sigh from below. Raindrops plunge through orange light, kiss rock, and flash to vapor with a shudder. Over and over, sky becomes water, water becomes steam, and the room of the world fills with breath. You do not stand beneath this rain. You are the stone it learns to touch, the basin it learns to fill, the hush it teaches to echo. The long cooling is not a single moment, but a habit. At first, the rain cannot win. Each drop perishes in a puff of white ghost, like popcorn that never quite becomes popcorn. But persistence, your oldest superpower, changes the balance. Nights lengthen as the moon gently slows your spin. Heat leaks into space with the patience of a lullaby. Volcanic tantrums leave longer pauses between their fiery paragraphs. Pools form in hollows. They hiss and whistle, and then, one dusk in a million dusks, they do not vanish. By morning, there is still a dark mirror in the rock. By the next evening, it has a little shore. Mainstream fact to rest your head on. The oldest minerals on Earth, tiny zircon crystals found in Western Australia, carry chemical whispers that they formed in contact with liquid water about 4.4 billion years ago. Imagine that. Crystals as small as eyelashes remembering rain older than continents. Their isotopes are like notes tucked in a baby book you didn't know you had. Proof that while the surface still glowed in places, somewhere, water lingered long enough to leave a signature. Rain becomes a ritual. Clouds wrap the world like a warm towel. The sky has the color of brewed tea. Lightning sketches bright veins and then politely vanishes. This isn't a raging tempest, so much as a steady rehearsal that forgets to stop. Picture a weather app with a single icon, showers, and the hourly forecast repeating for a few million years. Lakes merge with lakes, then overrun their rims, then forget that rims were ever a thing. Gullies wrinkle the young crust. Ash becomes mud. The planet tries on its first river mouths, the way you try on a new sweater. Unsure at first, then surprisingly comfortable. If you're wondering whether you should bring an umbrella, only if you've got the lifetime warranty. Historians still argue whether most of your water arrived tucked inside minerals and outgassed through volcano breath, or came later on the backs of countless space deliveries. Icy asteroids and a smattering of comets, ringing the bell and dropping off parcels for a very wet housewarming. The truth may be, as it often is, that the recipe uses all the ingredients. A damp interior and a generous sprinkle of late arrivals. Either way, the taste is the same. Salt and rock, heat and time. You're learning the geography of a planet that doesn't yet own the word continent. Instead, there are rafts, dark, heavy basalt plates that crack, drift, and subside. Volcanoes welt the surface in wide shields, and wherever lava meets water, it foams into rounded pillows that stack like loaves in a submarine bakery. Quirky tidbit to tuck under your blanket. Ancient comatite lavas, so hot they flowed like motor oil, once braided across the cooling seafloor. Today they're rare, relics of a hotter Earth, like a discontinued flavor only old-timers remember. Wherever these flows met the pooling sea, they bubbled and quenched into strange green stones that would look right at home in a dragon's pocket. Rain keeps writing. It leaches elements from fresh rock, sodium, calcium, potassium, and carries them to the low places. Basins deepen under the weight of water and the tug of tides that now begin to matter, rock flexing to the moon's slow metronome. Rivers carve, grind, and deliver grain after grain to the gathering seas. The first true ocean, not blue yet, but iron dark and mineral rich, rises by a handspan, then a hill, then a mountain of depth. It is warm, hot by your standards, acidic, and busy with ions, a simmering stock, salty with promise. You taste metal in the air. The horizon, for the first time, gains a little distance. Your sky thins by degrees. Carbon dioxide and water vapor still rule the conversation, but every drop that pools is also a debt the air repays. A little less steam, a little more open window. The clouds lift, not to reveal a postcard horizon, but to give space back to the world. The moon, your lantern, peeks between veils, enormous and close, dragging pale paths across newborn seas. Tides heave and retreat like great sleeping breaths. On some nights, if night can be borrowed this early, the reflections shimmer so brightly you could almost believe the ocean itself is thinking. Another bead on the string. The heavy bombardment by stray planetesimals is waning now, though it hasn't given up entirely. Each large splashdown delivers both heat and sometimes packets of water-bearing minerals. The seas do not mind. They are stocking a pantry. Sodium and chloride court each other until the brine holds taste. Calcium finds carbonate. Silica looks for a quiet corner. Chemistry is a dim orchestra tuning instruments, searching for the first note of something like melody. You're still only listening, but you've taken your seat in the hall. Between showers, the crust pops and sighs. New basalt wells up at spreading centers, while thicker, lighter patches, protocontinents, begin to raft above the denser plates. They are small, skerry-like, more archipelago than empire, but they offer a hint of tomorrow's dry feet. Rain darkens their surfaces and scours them clean. Waterfalls test their ledges. Temporary lakes find temporary shores. Somewhere a boulder remembers being a mountain. Somewhere a grain of sand remembers the boulder. You are the memory inside both. You lean still, seasons already sketched by your tilt. Though with oceans boiling less and breezes only learning their lines, the seasons are moods rather than months. The magnetosphere hums around you like a quiet generator on the porch, fending off much of the sun's harsher breath. Without it, the new water might wander away, stripped like paint in a hard wind. It is odd to feel protected by something you cannot see. But then again, you sleep better behind a door whose hinges you never examine. The world's first security system is already on duty, and it doesn't even require a password you'll forget. Now the storm that isn't a storm becomes the first soundscape of Earth. Rain on rock, rain on ash, rain on lake. The percussion is varied, patient, circular. It teaches the planet to erode and to smooth. It teaches canyons the art of becoming valleys. The air cools enough that fog forms not only in the high places, but along the new shorelines. Where hot rock meets pooling sea, the water crackles like 1,000 tiny applauses. If a lullaby had a texture, it would be this: warm mist on skin you don't yet have, a steady tap-tap, and the far-off cough of a volcano clearing its throat. As oceans deepen, the glare of red-hot stone gives way to a constant gleam. Daylight scatters through clouds and becomes a softness. You, who started as sparks and gravel, now sway as waves. In the mineral broth, ions bump and greet and sometimes briefly hold hands before dancing on. You are not yet chemistry's sentence, but you are a growing vocabulary. If you listen closely, beneath the hiss and patter, you can almost hear consonants lining up for a first word. It will take ages for that word to be spoken. For now, let the planet take its long bath. The roof of cloud is high and generous, the floors are basalt and pillow lava soft, and every basin is brimming. The recipe is simple: gravity to gather, time to cool, a sky full of rain, and stone willing to surrender its salts. You are the potential dissolved in this warmth, the promise moving with every current. Sleep inside the sound of water becoming world. You settle beneath the new ocean skin, where light fades to velvet and heat flows from stone like a secret. The world above keeps raining. Down here the rain becomes chemistry, and chemistry begins to practice being alive. Chimneys rise from the sea floor, black and white smokers, mineral towers exhaling hot, alkaline water into a cooler, acidic sea. You nestle near one like a cat by a radiator, watching billows full of hydrogen, methane, and tiny metal-rich bubbles curl out and swirl away. The towers are porous, crowded with microchambers the size of pinholes, each one a little room with a gradient across its walls. Hotter within, cooler without, more alkaline within, more acidic without. Electrical imbalances itching to be spent. Energy is writing love letters to matter, and the envelopes are made of stone. You are dissolved now, ions and simple molecules, bumping elbows in a warm broth, salted by continents that aren't yet, and seasoned by volcanic breath. Carbon dioxide drifts in from the water. Hydrogen seeps from rock, where seawater and peridotite react in a slow-motion fizz called serpentinization. In these tiny chambers, iron-sulfur minerals act like rusty catalysts, coaxing carbon into more interesting shapes. Mainstream fact: in modern oceans, entire ecosystems flourish around hydrothermal vents using chemosynthesis, not sunlight. Bacteria eat chemical gradients and, in doing so, feed worms, crabs, and fish in lightless cities. If life can build skyscrapers out of chemistry now, you can let it take baby steps then. Molecules learn the rhythm first. short carbon chains link and drift apart. Fatty acids, greasy little soap relatives, assemble into spheres without anyone giving a pep talk. They just like the geometry. These micelles and vesicles bloom and shrink with temperature and salt the way you puff and relax under blankets. Nucleotides, A, U, G, C, play a shy card game on mineral surfaces. In the rocking between alkaline vent waters and the more acidic ocean, in the seesaw of hot and cool, reactions that would never stand up in a quiet beaker begin to string themselves together. It's a tide pool logic that doesn't yet need a dictionary. You warm yourself by gradients the way you used to warm yourself by starlight, and you listen to accidents, learn persistence. A strand forms just a few bases long, and then another. They pair and unpair like dancers trying steps they don't know yet. One day being a generous term down here, one of these strands folds in such a way that it helps another strand form faster. A ribozyme, a small helper that is both instruction and tool. You, without being anyone yet, teach yourself to assemble more of yourself. There is no applause, only a slightly quicker heartbeat in the reactions. Historians still argue whether the first engine of you is an RNA world full of self-copying strands, a metabolism-first iron-sulfur world where networks of reactions come first and genes hitch a ride later, or a lipid-first foam where membranes start the party and invite whatever chemistry can pay rent. Some even argue for both and reactions humming in mineral pores, strands forming on clay surfaces, membranes budding off from froth at the edges. Scientists are polite about it mostly. The vents keep breathing either way. A fringe-leaning tidbit to tuck under your pillow. Panspermia, life arriving from space like sourdough starter shared between kitchens, sits on the speculative shelf. Meteorites like the Murchison fall on modern Earth carrying amino acids and other organic molecules. They even have a distinct smell people describe as wet hay and alcohol, which is not exactly a Michelin review, but does get your attention. Whether the first living chemistry is delivered, jump-started, or purely homegrown remains open, but the ingredients list does read like a universe that enjoys cooking. You inhale, through vents, through gradients, and exhale, through reactions, with the seafloor. The mineral chimneys offer scaffolding. Their thin walls concentrate molecules the way a sieve holds seeds. Proton gradients across those walls whisper to phosphorus chemistry. Make bonds, store energy. ATP won't be your battery yet, but something like it will pass electrons and hoard little packets of potential, a purse of lightning you can spend when a bond needs a push. In these pitted, honeycombed rooms, you learn thrift, how to recycle energy, how to pass intermediates hand to hand like buckets in a quiet fire brigade. It helps to have walls, vesicles that form from fatty acids, bumped by turbulence and salted by the ocean, bud and swallow and sometimes trap little worlds. They're leaky, but leaks are not always problems. A bit of leakiness keeps a conversation going with the outside, the earliest version of metabolism's open door. When two vesicles fuse, their insides mix, and some combinations are luckier. A patch of RNA that helps make copy of itself ends up next to a patch that helps make lipids. This hybrid skin thickens, grows more stable, and survives the next hot flush. You wouldn't call it a cell yet. You would call it a habit with boundaries. The dance is uneven. For every strand that half copies and falls apart, 1,000 try again. For every vesicle that grows, divides, and holds its chemistry tight, 10,000 pop like soap bubbles in a toddler's bath. But gradients keep paying out. Minerals keep catalyzing, and the tide of chance keeps crashing against the shore of structure. You are evolution even before genes, just selection among chemistries, a bias toward whatever lasts an hour longer in this noisy kitchen. If you're looking for romance, it's here, in patience. Success measured in molecules that survive long enough to invite friends. Mainstream fact to rest on. In 1953, a student named Stanley Miller ran a spark through a flask of simple gases and water, and after a week found amino acids, life's building blocks, condensed out of the chaos. The early Earth gas mix in that experiment isn't quite right by today's models, less methane and ammonia, more carbon dioxide and nitrogen, but the principle stands. Energy plus simple chemistry yields complexity, and it does so with alarming enthusiasm. Your story is not a miracle in the sense of breaking rules. It's a miracle of rules allowed to run for a very long time. There is humor, even here. Imagine the first protocell wiggling because its membrane is a little too spicy with fatty acids and thinking, if it could think, I should really cut down on the sulfides. Or the vent crab of the future, judging these tiny chemical parties the way a bouncer judges a very exclusive rooftop bar. Name on the list? No? Come back when you can metabolize. Soft smiles belong in the deep, too. You keep failing forward. Nucleotides assemble better on clay surfaces like montmorillonite. You take note and lean your chemistry toward the muds. A stray metal ion helps a fold. You keep it at your table. When a membrane traps a strand that helps more membrane form, you've invented inheritance without paperwork. The first evolutionary feedback loop hums like a distant generator. Structure promotes function. Function preserves structure. The loop is quiet, but it never sleeps. From the vents you wander, still as chemicals, toward the margins. In warm little ponds near volcanic shores, wet-dry cycles drive condensation reactions that otherwise sulk in solution. The sun peeks through steam, droplets concentrate, films crack and flake. Strands lengthen. It isn't either or. The ocean's lungs pump chemistry, while the shoreline's breath adds syllables, and both become parts of your accent. Historians still argue whether tide pools or alkaline vents deserve top billing in your origin credits. You, ever diplomatic, nod to both and keep replicating. Then the moment, which is not a moment so much as a drifting average tipping over a threshold. A strand inside a fatty bubble copies itself with enough fidelity to matter and enough error to explore. The bubble grows by eating loose fatty acids, then shears into two bubbles in a current. Each daughter keeps some strands. One survives a hot pulse because its membrane is thicker. Another thrives in a cooler eddy because its strands fold better at low temperature. The line between chemistry that lingers and life that persists blurs, and you step across it without fanfare because there is no one to clap. Yet. You are alive. Not thinking, not choosing, not even swimming, just existing in a way that insists on tomorrow. You take in gradients and leak waste. You copy and mutate. You divide, you endure. The unbroken chain that will braid through every ancestor, every gamble, every fire and winter, tightens its first knot. It is not noble, it is not pretty. It is hunger with a boundary and a plan made only of how to make the next you. But it is yours. You place a pebble on the cairn of time, and another, and another. The ocean sighs above. The vent breathes. The moon draws its slow chalk lines in the tides. your world has learned a new verb. You keep it small, just long enough to last the night. You keep the habit of boundaries and the taste for gradients, and one of your leaky bubbles becomes less leaky on purpose. The skin is no longer a flimsy soap. It is a stitched membrane of fatty tails and careful gates, letting protons trickle back across with the same satisfaction you felt when the vent first paid you in energy. Inside, a strand that once only helped copy others now wears the foreman's hat, coordinating the assembly line. Take this, bind that, pass the spark, make more of me. You are a cell, small as a whisper, tough as a habit, and single as a raindrop on basalt. The ocean around you is warm and metallic. The moon's tides pull great sleeping breaths through the water, and the vent cities glow like nighttime neighborhoods under the new sea. This world is still mostly water, but it is not the blue you know. Iron leaches from the young crust and swims through the sea like invisible tea, giving the water a dark green-black cast. Overhead, the sky has a copper-orange tint from methane and haze, the sun a dimmer coin than in your day. A faint young sun, cushioned by greenhouse blankets so your ocean doesn't lock into ice. You feel light as warmth more than illumination. It is enough for now to power the currents that bring you food, enough to set a rhythm by which you make choices you don't yet have words for. On some rocks, electric whispers race as lightning lands. Down here, those whispers are the language of gradients, and you are fluent. Mainstream fact: the Archean Earth's atmosphere holds almost no free oxygen. It is a world ruled by carbon dioxide, methane, nitrogen, and steam. The proof, written later in banded iron formations, will show that when oxygen begins to leak into the oceans, iron will seize it and settle to the seafloor in rust-red layers. For now, oxygen is the villain in a play that hasn't started. Too reactive, too greedy for electrons, a chemical toddler who pulls the tablecloth. Your days, as much as a microbe counts days, are blissfully repetitive. You sip energy from redox reactions, passing electrons down tiny chains like buckets in a quiet brigade. You hoard your chemical winnings in triphosphate purses and spend them to knit parts. A new membrane patch here, a little protein hinge there. Your cytoplasm hums like a small kitchen, crowded, efficient, occasionally sticky. There's no HR department, but the performance reviews are ruthless. Copy well or be edited out of the lineage. When resources thin, you idle. When gradients bloom, you leap. You do not think, but your metabolism makes a convincing imitation of intention. You are not alone, but you are the only kind of life. Your cousins crowd the warm slopes, swarm the mineral surfaces, drift in clouds through sunlit shallows, cling in films to stones scoured by tide. Viewed from above, by an observer you do not have, you'd look like lace on the seafloor and fog in the top few meters, a planet wearing a microbial shawl. You are not a creature as much as life itself, smeared thin. The world's biography is a single sentence written millions upon millions of times, each copy with tiny typos that sometimes, rarely, help the next line read better. Historians still argue whether the oldest supposed microfossils, dark, tube-like inclusions in ancient rocks, are truly your bodies turned to stone or mineral lookalikes grown by chemistry alone. They also debate whether carbon isotope whispers from 3.8 billion-year-old rocks count as your signature, or just a chemical coincidence. Early evidence is shy and occasionally coy. You let the arguments roll like surf over stromatolite shallows you'll build later, content to keep dividing. Division becomes your art. You gather supplies, pin your one circular chromosome to the wall, and pull it in opposite directions as you lengthen. A ring of protein tightens like a belt. The membrane puckers, and with a soft pop, you are two. Binary fissure is efficient, tidy, and free of drama. No custody battles over organelles, no awkward family dinners. You pass along nearly everything: the knack for metabolism, the set of enzymes that know the house rules, the membrane recipe that works at this temperature and pH. Mutations arrive with the male. Most junk, some dangerous, a precious few helpful. And selection handles the recycling. Quirky tidbit: some researchers lovingly champion the purple Earth hypothesis, the idea that before green chlorophyll stole the show, early phototrophs might have used retinal pigments to harvest light, painting the young world in magenta hues under an orange sky. Imagine your shallows glowing like a cosmic smoothie. It's not mainstream, but it's delicious to picture as you nap. You spread as a film over rocks near shore, each tide exposing you briefly to air that would be lethal if you lingered, each wave sliding you back into safety. You colonize the micro-chimneys of vents like tenants in a honeycomb apartment, each cell its own studio with a shared hallway of ions. You drift in the open ocean, a shoal of cells in the photic zone, tasting the light for calories and the dark for sulfur. You have no eyes, but gradients are sight enough. You have no nerves, but chemistry connects you. When a patch of food appears, your enzymes bloom in numbers, like a pop-up market that knows exactly when to set out more baskets. The planet keeps practicing plate tectonics, gingerly at first, pushing up lighter patches of crust that ride higher than their neighbors. These proto-continents shave the wind, redirect currents, and create sheltered embayments where your films can relax into thick mats. Later, those mats will trap silt and precipitate minerals, building lumpy columns we'll call stromatolites, living rocks that yawn into the sunlight one layer at a time. For now, the mats are soft and hungry, sticking to any surface that so much as looks at them. You measure success in doubling times. Under the right conditions, you can make a copy of yourself in minutes. Under poor ones, you wait patient hours or days. Your calendar is growth. Your holiday is stability. If you could write a self-help book, its title would be Boundaries, Gradients, Snacks. Occasionally you overbuild a cell wall like someone installing 6 deadbolts on a bathroom door. Sometimes your proton pumps run so enthusiastically, it feels like you've had 3 espressos. And every once in a while, a plasmid shows up uninvited, co-worker with a USB stick, promising new features that are mostly headaches. The ocean's chemistry adjusts to your existence, even if no one announces the policy change. You draw carbon into your bodies, exhale reduced gases, alter the pH of microenvironments. You turn rock powders into food, and your wastes into rock again. When you die, and you do routinely, your remains rain down as fine, dark snow that blankets the seafloor and carries whispers of your metabolism into the deep. There is nothing sentimental about this. There is also nothing cruel. It is a circle where the arrows all point forward. Scientists will later find whispers of you in those ancient zircons and in rocks altered by fluids that held your carbon. They will walk the Pilbara Craton and Greenland's Isua Belt and squint at patterns with hand lenses, wondering if the textures are biology's fingerprints or geology's doodles. They will set up laboratories that simulate your seas and spark them and bathe them in UV, chasing a story that you, frankly, told perfectly well by just continuing to exist. You do not mind the attention. The attention is love in a different dialect. You have not invented sex. That will be a later innovation, shuffling the deck rather than copying the same hand, when the world asks for speed and variety. For now, clonal is enough. It is, in fact, triumphant. Ere long, you occupy every niche that can be occupied with your simple toolkit. Hot, cold, salty, sour, alkaline, metal-rich, low-nutrient, high-sulfur. The vents you cuddled by in your first nights remain cozy, but you no longer need them to tuck you in. Gradients are everywhere if you learn to see them. Above, the lantern of the moon still draws chalk-white paths across the water, and the percussion of rain softens to a steady hush. You, once stardust and then chemistry, are now persistence wearing a membrane. You are one, and for 1 billion years, one is enough. The planet does not rush you. Time has lost its shoes and is padding quietly down the hall. Keep dividing. Keep mending. Keep listening to the soft battery hum of your proton pumps. There is no chorus yet, but your single note is true and long, and all the later harmonies will need it to find their pitch. Light reaches down through the top meters of the ocean like soft currency, and one of your cousins learns how to spend it. A small, plain cell, a relative you might have ignored at family gatherings of the Archean, stitches together a new trick. Harvesting sunlight, splitting water, and bottling the energy as sugar. Cyanobacteria, unassuming architects, inhale carbon dioxide, take a long drink from the sea, and exhale a waste you have spent 1 billion years avoiding. Oxygen. The word feels clean in your future mouth. Right now, it is a solvent with opinions, a rude guest that steals electrons at parties and knocks over the punch. You keep to your vents and sediments and anoxic eddies, but the shallows begin to glow with green work, and the ocean starts to change its mind about everything. Mainstream fact: around 2.4 billion years ago, oxygen produced by photosynthesis began to accumulate in the atmosphere, an upheaval called the Great Oxidation Event. Before the sky turned breathable, the oxygen found something else to occupy it. Iron. Remember the iron tea steeping through your young ocean? Oxygen meets it, and the water fills with rust. Layer after layer settles to the seafloor. Banded iron formations, red and gray stripes like a planet-sized barcode, and the sea clears of dissolved iron the way a kettle clears when you change the filter. You can read those bands in stone today like a sleep tracker from the planet's adolescence. Oxygen's first fits and starts, then its long exhale. At first, you barely notice. You are busy being you, splitting, mending, sipping gradients in the dim. But the oxygen keeps coming, little puffs at first, then strong breaths. Mats of cyanobacteria stack into stromatolites that grow toward the light, their slimy layers trapping silt and precipitated minerals. Quirky tidbit: you can still stub your toe on living stromatolites in places like Shark Bay. Lumpy, quiet cathedrals built one micro-layer at a time by the same humble strategy. Sunlight turned into stone. The ocean feels different, as if the music has changed key. Sulfide-loving cousins retreat, blinking, into pockets at the seafloor, and beneath sediments where oxygen can't reach. You develop new habits, enzymes to diffuse the sharp temper of oxygen's reactive forms. Superoxide and peroxide are like toddlers with scissors. You learn to take them gently by the hand and put the scissors in a drawer. Those who don't adapt become yesterday's snow in the dark, a soft carpet that feeds the next generation or dissolves into whispers of carbon. The first mass extinction on Earth arrives not with fangs or fire, but with breath. Historians still argue whether oxygen rose smoothly or in fits, whiffs in local oases long before the big atmospheric shift, or a patchwork of green worlds stitched together into one sky. Whether cyanobacteria invented their light-splitting genius early and waited for sinks to fill, or whether the invention itself came late and the climb was steep. They debate whether volcanic gases and the balance of continents set the timing, or whether the whole planet was primed and only needed a nudge. You, busy surviving, file the minutes under interesting and keep your membranes tight. As the ocean's iron takes its rust and settles, the oxygen starts to collect in the air. It doesn't leap to 21% and call it a day. It inches, pauses, and inches again. Methane in the atmosphere, your cozy greenhouse blanket from the Archean, reacts with the newcomer and thins. With less methane, heat leaks more freely. That's tomorrow's trouble, and you'll meet it bravely. But you can feel a draft in the hall. For now, the big news is that sunlight energy has been laundered into sugar, and some of your cousins discover that oxygen, used carefully, is not just poison. It's a powerful final handshake at the end of an electron transport chain. With oxygen as the last acceptor, the yield goes up. More energy per byte, more ATP in the purse. The world just invented compound interest. You do not jump to the front of that line overnight. Plenty of you stay faithful to the older ways: fermentation, anoxygenic photosynthesis, chemosynthesis in the dark. But the menu has expanded, and the kitchen hums with new appliances. Somewhere in a microfilm under bright water, a cell that tolerates oxygen a little better outcompetes its neighbor. In another eddy, a microbe that can use the stuff chases gradients with a new spring in its step. The balance tips not by decree, but by 1,000,000 tiny votes, counted one doubling at a time. The sky begins making a second gift from the first. Up high, oxygen forms ozone, a shield that sips the sun's ultraviolet and softens the burn. You cannot feel it from the sea floor, but you will one day bask beneath it and call it weather. File it away as the world's first parasol, complimentary with every purchase of oxygen. Like opening a new account and getting a toaster. You didn't ask, but you're not returning it. Not everyone is thrilled. In mat communities, the layers wage a quiet zoning war. Oxygen makers on top, anaerobic stalwarts beneath, each doing business with the other's trash. If you could sit in on the council meeting, the minutes would read, Agenda Item 1, please stop murdering us with your exhaust. Agenda Item 2, alternatively, learn to share. 3 soft laughs for the record. First, when the oxygen levels spike in a puddle and everyone holds their metaphorical breath. Second, when a microbe invents catalase and becomes the hero of the day by burping bubbles of oxygen out of the soup. Third, when some of you write "No O2" on a sign in your minds and move to the low oxygen neighborhoods like biogeochemical introverts. The continents, growing slowly, join the plot. As weather attacks fresh rock, nutrients wash into the sea, phosphorus and friends, and green blooms wax and wane with the seasons you've had since the moon's dance tilted your axis. When blooms die, their bodies sink, locking carbon away in mud and rock. A little less carbon dioxide in the air means a little less greenhouse, and the thermostat nudges lower. You, broadened by oxygen, plan to handle cold better than your grandparents ever did. You will need that plan. Rocks begin to record the new regime on land as well as sea. After the iron in the ocean is mostly dealt with, red beds appear. rust-tinted sediments colored by oxidized iron carried by air and rivers. The color palette of the planet expands. Rivers flow under atmospheres that would blister your earlier skin. Now you could, in theory, dabble a finger if you weren't still a microbe and the river weren't imaginary. Souvenir shops in the deep future will polish slabs of those banded iron formations into countertops and pendants. Somewhere a kitchen will be decorated with your catastrophe, and dinners will be served on the memory of your hardest lesson. You take the joke well. The great oxidation does not end life. It prunes and selects and writes new rules in the margins. The anaerobes keep their refuges in sediments, in guts that haven't been invented yet, in brines and vents that ignore sky gossip. And the oxygen-tolerant rise in the light. A few populations, blessed with the right proteins, begin to love oxygen. They burn their food cleanly, leave only carbon dioxide and water, and use the surplus energy to build more ambitious molecules, to repair faster, to grow sturdier skins. You have taken a poison and turned it into breath. That's very you. Breathe then, in the way a microbe breathes. Electrons passed to a hungry terminus, membrane potentials whispering. ATP handing out tiny envelopes of pay. The planet hums in a slightly higher key. The sea is less metal, more memory. The sky has a new scent, sharp and pale. If you had nerves, they would feel electric. If you had eyes, they would squint at the brightness over the shallows. You have neither, and you do not mind. You have time. What you also have, thanks to oxygen's meddling with methane, is a world tipped toward chill. Ice begins to practice at the poles. The draft you felt becomes a breeze that learns words like glacier. But that is another lesson, and you will take it wrapped in patience. For tonight, hold the image of green films exhaling, seas turning from iron tea to clear broth, and tiny cells learning to walk a tightrope over a reactive gas without falling. You survive by changing the rules, and the rules, breath by breath, change you. You feel the draft become a breeze, and the breeze become a steady, careful cold. Oxygen has stolen the hand-warming methane from the sky. The sun is still a little faint in its youth, and fresh rock weathers greedily, pulling carbon dioxide out of the air like a thrifty shopper clearing a sale rack. The thermostat nudges downward, clicks again, and then keeps clicking because white makes more white. Ice brightens the planet, brightness reflects more sunlight, and the chill feeds itself. You've met feedback before inside membranes. Now you meet it on a planetary stage. Think of it as Earth trying cold brew, only without the brew. At first you notice longer winters at the poles, winter being a generous word for a microbe, but seasons gain a sharper bite. Snow lingers. Glaciers plant their feet and decide not to lift them. The line of floating sea ice creeps outward, clear as a boundary on a map, then smudges that boundary and redraws it farther toward the equator. You keep to your refuges, whispering your chemistries in vents and mats, feeling the light dim in shallow water, as ice thickens above like frost on a window that won't wipe clean. The freeze is slow enough to watch, yet relentless enough to win. Sea ice knits into a lid. Land ice grows into tongues that bulldoze rock and leave it in messy piles called moraines, tidy only in hindsight. Under the thicker ice, liquid water still circulates. Salt and pressure keep it from surrendering. But at the surface, the world becomes lacquered in white and blue, a pearl with a cold smile. Mainstream fact, evidence on multiple continents shows glacial deposits at tropical paleolatitudes during the Neoproterozoic. The Sturtian, 9 million years ago, and Marinoan glaciations, suggesting ice reached close to, or fully to, the equator. Low-latitude tills and cap carbonates blanketing them like sudden frosting are the rock record's way of saying, yes, the freezer door stayed open. Your oceans go dark under meters, maybe hundreds of meters, of ice. But dark is not dead. Brine channels vein the sea ice like tiny hallways, pockets rich in salt and chemistry where microbes linger, gossiping softly in enzymes. Cryoconite, powdered rock and soot mixed with living films, makes little skylights that drink sunlight and melt holes, a rooftop garden in a frozen city. On the seafloor, hydrothermal vents still breathe. Their black smoke curls upward into night water, a warm rumor that refuses to end. You tuck yourself beside chimneys, inside sediments, and in the slushy equatorial belt, if there is one, napping between pulses of food like a creature under too many blankets. Quirky tidbit. While banded iron formations mostly belong to your earlier oxygen-starved epoch, they blink back into existence during snowball intervals. Iron redissolving under anoxic, ice-sealed seas, and then, during episodes of oxygenation, precipitating again. It's as if the planet briefly tries on retro fashion. Remember rust stripes? We brought them back for winter. Meanwhile, dropstones, lonely cobbles carried by icebergs, plunk into fine seafloor mud and leave deformed bedding, geological belly flops that say, ice above, even here. The cold edits the planet's soundtrack. Wave crash is muffled, rain hushes, the loudest voices are creaks and groans where glaciers move, and the soft percussive ping of frost cracking rock. You, who once wrote yourself across basalt with warm rain for ink, now write yourself in miniature. Enzymes that fold to work at low temperatures, membranes tweaked to stay flexible, proteins with tiny hands to manage ice-loving water. If later fish and insects perfect antifreeze proteins, the idea begins here. In principle, survival as chemistry's tailoring. 3 soft chuckles to keep you cozy. Your proton pumps wear metaphorical scarves. Your membranes complain like wooden doors in winter. And your metabolic rates slow so much, it's like switching from espresso to herbal tea. Soothing, if not exciting. Historians still argue whether the planet locked into a hard snowball, ice from pole to pole with only brine channels to breathe through, or a slush ball with belts of thin ice or even open water near the equator. They still argue whether the trigger was chiefly oxygen's takedown of methane, the drawdown of CO2 by weathering a newly assembled supercontinent, or orbital quirks that lined up like dominoes. They also debate how thick the sea ice grew, tens of meters or kilometer scale, and how sunlight and nutrients pulsed beneath the lid. The rock record speaks, but in a glacial accent. You endure by playing small and patient. Photosynthesis retreats but doesn't vanish. Under thin ice, light filters enough to keep little factories open on short hours. Chemosynthesizers keep their long shifts beside vents, unfussy about weather. Mats, half dormant, bide their time, hoarding sugars the way squirrels will hoard acorns in futures you'll help build. Genetic tinkerings that once were optional, detoxifying oxygen, repairing cold damage, fine-tuning ribosomes, become policy. Each successful copy is a vote for a tiny change, that makes cold slightly less rude. On land, what little of it peeks out, glaciers carve U-shaped valleys and whittle peaks to horns. Ground-down flour of rock drifts with winds and dusts the ice surface, dimming its albedo in places and encouraging melt pools in summer's shy visits. Those little blue ponds become greenish where life finds them. If you listen, and you are good at listening, you hear membranes flex and enzymes purr in the noon-thin light. The moon still pulls at the sea under the lid. Tides surge and fall unseen, a hidden waltz that keeps nutrients from settling into forever. Rhythms persist even when melodies vanish. Meanwhile, carbon dioxide doesn't get the memo to stay low forever. Volcanoes keep exhaling through vents and under ice fissures, but with oceans sealed and weathering stalled by ice, there's no easy sink. CO2 accumulates in the sky room, slow and sure. Think of it as the planet's thick quilt being stitched back together, one square at a time. When the blanket grows warm enough, something gives. Catastrophe can wear a smile. In this case, the smile is rain. When the thaw begins, it's dramatic beyond sound. Sea ice thins, open water blooms, dark ocean drinks sunlight and accelerates the warming. Glaciers retreat and then stampede backward. Rivers roar on rock that forgot what wet felt like. The ocean, long sealed, sucks in carbon dioxide and then exhales carbonate chemistry in a giddy rush. Cap carbonates, thick, global layers of limestone and dolostone, fall out of solution and coat the formerly glacial world like frosting. You didn't mean to pour all at once. It looks messy in cross-section. It feels, after so long a quiet, like laughter. But do not hurry to the thaw yet. The lesson of winter is not mere endurance, but invention. Under the pressure of ice, you perfect teamwork in mats, trade metabolites like favors, and learn that proximity can be profit. This habit, holding partners close, will matter soon, when one cell will take another into itself and refuse to spit it out. For now, keep the vent's hearth warm, keep the brine channel's door cracked, and keep your little energy purses tied tight. Mainstream fact revisited. The two great Neoproterozoic glaciations bracket an age of biological ambition. In their wake, oxygen likely ticks upward, nutrients pulse through freshly ground seas, and evolution stretches after a very long nap. You, tiny and tireless, are not just survivors. You are the authors of what comes next. And because somebody will ask, no, there are no penguins yet, you will invent them much later, give them tuxedos, and then photograph them obsessively. For now, the world wears the tuxedo. A black ocean under a white coat, bow-tied with blue crevasses. Dress code, formal, freezing. Breathe, electron to acceptor, gradient to AT. And let the ice be the silence that sharpens your listening. The cold will break, the lid will lift, the light will return. When it does, you'll be ready with new tricks. Some learned in the dark, some invented on the fly, and one about to redefine what a cell can be. Keep close. Warm is coming, and with it, a partnership that changes everything. Warm returns like a remembered melody, and with it, something you practiced during the long winter becomes policy. Keep partners close. One day in the quiet surf, you, an obligate minimalist, an archaeal-grade microbe with tidy tastes, reach out with a gulping fold of membrane to eat a smaller, twitchy bacterium. You've done this before, but this time the lunch does not dissolve. It keeps breathing. It keeps sharing electrons. It pays rent. In energy, the attempted meal becomes a roommate, then a co-worker, then family. You are no longer a single house with one room. You are an inner neighborhood. Your little tenant will one day be called a mitochondrion, and together you change the rules of what a cell can be. The bargain is simple and revolutionary. The newcomer knows how to use oxygen without catching fire, handing electrons down a chain and finishing with a clean handshake that yields far more ATP per byte than fermentation ever did. You, the host, provide protection, minerals, and a steady pantry. Your guest provides an energy stipend rich enough to fund ambition. Where a lone prokaryote could power only a small genome and a cramped interior, this partnership opens the budget. You can afford storage closets, better tools, and even a library with a door. Mainstream fact: mitochondria carry their own circular DNA, use bacterial-style ribosomes, and wear a double membrane, strong signatures that they descend from free-living bacteria, likely alpha proteobacteria, taken inside an ancient host. They still divide by fission, and in your future body, they will pass down mostly through the maternal line. If you ever wondered why your cells own tiny roommates with their own opinionated instruction manuals, it's because they used to pay rent in a different city. The deal has side effects. Good ones. With energy flush, you start building an internal skeleton. Actin filaments and microtubules span your cytoplasm like beams and rails. Motor proteins stroll these tracks carrying vesicles as if delivering parcels. Traffic report: slight congestion near the Golgi. Kinesin legs proceeding at a stately 100 steps per second. You pinch and sculpt membranes until they become hallways and rooms. The endoplasmic reticulum for protein folding, a maze where the instructions come in 4 languages and you're missing one Allen key, and the Golgi apparatus for tagging, packing, and shipping. Digestion gets its own acid-safe lockers, lysosomes, and detox Urson's a workshop, peroxisomes, with its own fire extinguisher. Then you build a vault. DNA, no longer tethered to one wall as a naked loop, becomes multiple linear chromosomes, wrapped on spools of protein and tucked into a nucleus behind a selective gate. Inside, transcription hums. Outside, translation clacks. Messages pass through pores like notes under a door. Why a nucleus now? Maybe to protect delicate genes from reactive oxygen. Maybe to organize splicing and quality control. Maybe, whisper it, because a virus once barged in and left behind both trouble and tools. Historians still argue whether the nucleus formed before or after the mitochondrial deal, whether the original host was an Asgard like Archeon or something stranger, and whether syntrophic hydrogen sharing fueled the first dates. You let them debate. You have porins to install. Your shape changes. You are no longer a tiny sphere with a simple surface. You can grow larger without starving your core because the cytoskeleton moves things quickly and the mitochondria print energy in bulk. Larger size means more time between divisions, more room for regulation, more gene families to keep track of. You are slower, but you are deeper. In a world where oxygen now wanders the halls, this depth pays. Fossils begin to whisper your presence. In ancient shales appear acritarchs, mysterious walled microfossils with delicate spikes and spheres, and ribbon-like Grippania spiralis in older rocks hints at large, complex cells. Sterile molecules, fats you now synthesize for flexible membranes, leave traces that geochemists will one day sniff out. signatures of eukaryotic life woven into stone. You will become flamboyant much later. For now, you're a connoisseur of quiet luxuries, introns to edit, lipids to tune, a cytoskeleton that lets you do a slow dance instead of a shuffle. Quirky tidbit to stash in your ER. Some modern single cells are entire gardens unto themselves. A protist called Hatena can swallow an alga and run on borrowed photosynthesis. Certain sea slugs steal chloroplasts, kleptoplasty, and sunbathe like tiny solar panels. And a humble amoeba, Paulinella, acquired its own brand new plastid, independently of the lineage that will one day give plants their chloroplasts. Endosymbiosis is not just a one-time stunt, it's a lifestyle, like adopting a roommate who also happens to be a chef. With the cytoskeleton comes motion with style. You send pseudopods forward like exploratory hands, test a surface and glide. You can engulf not just bacteria, but other eukaryotes, and sometimes you even resist being eaten by each other through armored cell walls or fast escapes. You are inventing new verbs: crawl, reach, wrap, pinch, fuse. Vacuoles swell and shrink, vesicles bud and dock, membranes kiss and part. The cell is a city at night, lit by the hum of work. Somewhere a mitochondrion mutters that it is the powerhouse of this cell. You print it on a t-shirt and make them wear uniforms. They grumble and keep making ATM. Energy changes not only what you can build, but what you can repair. With mitochondria, you can spend big to fix mistakes, making proofreading enzymes worth their salary. More accurate replication means genomes can sprawl without collapsing under error. More energy also means you can park unused programs until a new niche invites them. The blueprint thickens. Regulation, signaling, checkpoints. You become not just alive, but managerial. You are still one, but within your one are many. The old boundaries remain: membrane, gradients, snacks. But now there are boundaries inside boundaries, gradients across organelles, and snack deliveries on schedule. You are a community pretending to be an individual, and the pretense is so good it becomes truth. If earlier life was a song with one melody, you are a chord, and your harmonics reach farther than a prokaryote's breath can carry. The world outside supports this turn inward. Oxygen lingers. Nutrients pulse across shelves, scoured by retreating ice. Continents, now more confident in their tectonic waltz, stitch and rip in slow choreographies that shuffle coastlines and stir currents. Photosynthesizers decorate the sunlit shallows. Heterotrophs browse and hunt in 3 dimensions. Detritivores mine the floor for yesterday's weather. Your niche isn't a location anymore, so much as a strategy. A way of making a living within a metabolism-rich market. Like any new landlord-tenant relationship, the mitochondrial arrangement needs rules. You transfer many of your guests' genes to your own chromosomes, a bureaucratic consolidation that keeps control local to the nucleus. You keep just enough instructions in the mitochondrion to run its respiratory chain on-site, like a factory with a small control room. Signals ping back and forth, calcium puffs, redox whispers, peptides folded or misfolded as messages. When a mitochondrion fails inspection, you recycle it by autophagy, a polite eviction with comprehensive composting. It's not personal, it's housekeeping. Historians still argue whether eukaryotes belong on a third domain of life, separate from bacteria and archaea, or whether you sprouted right out of the archaeal branch, an eocyte, or two-domain view that makes you glorified archaeal sparkle with bacterial flair. They still argue whether one alpha proteobacterial lineage fathered all mitochondria or whether the story has detours. You take the long view. Whatever the tree, your trunk thickens. You almost chuckle as microtubules slip into little catastrophes, tracks unspooling like spaghetti that's had enough, the ER quietly correcting any protein without the right postal code, and the nucleus keeping the door closed if even one high stone goes missing because it's guarding your novel in progress. You are now a eukaryote, a cell with rooms, rails, and a library, and an outsourced power plant. The world will never be the same because complexity feeds on energy, and you have discovered cheap electricity. Soon you will use that energy to try a new way of making more of you. Sex, a gene-shuffling festival that will turbocharge change. And then you'll learn to stay together after division, to divide labor, to build bodies. For the moment, savor the hush of your inner city. Vesicles murmur at the docks, mitochondria tick, the nucleus turns pages. Outside, the moon writes silver on water. Inside, you hold the pen now, and your handwriting is getting fancy. You have rooms, rails, and a dependable power grid. Now you invent a party that rewrites the guest list. After ages of neat binary fission, you try a different kind of arithmetic. You halve, shuffle, and merge. Two lineages meet, exchange pages from their manuals, and kindle something new, a descendant that is not a copy, but a remix. You call it sex, though tonight it's more like quiet paperwork with candlelight. Meiosis paras your genome down, recombination crosses strands like braids, and gametes, small hopeful packets, go looking for one another the way lantern boats look for their matching glow. When they fuse, you are whole again, and richer for the trade. Mainstream fact. Across eukaryotes, the core toolkit for meiosis and recombination is astonishingly conserved, which tells you sex is ancient, almost as old as the eukaryotic house itself. It's expensive. 2 individuals for 1 baby is not great bookkeeping. Risky, mixing libraries means shelving errors too, and slow. But evolution pays the subscription because shuffling challenges makes you nimble. Parasites chase. You change the locks. Environments flip. You roll new dice without burning the building down. The twofold cost buys a lifetime membership to variation. You feel the difference inside the city of your cell, crossing over swaps sections between paired chromosomes. Alleles that never met before shake hands, and proteins see what they can do together. Some combinations falter. Some sing. Offspring arrive with fresh solutions to old problems. Membranes tuned to a different chill. Enzymes with faster hands. Receptors that smell food a fraction sooner. You can almost hear mitochondria purring. More projects to power. Historians still argue whether sex evolved once in a singular early eukaryote or winked on multiple times in parallel, whether viruses nudged the invention by smuggling DNA tricks into your library, whether the primary driver was escaping mutations, dodging pathogens, or grabbing nutrients in new ways. You nod from your nucleus door and keep sorting chromosomes. Debate is lovely, but the dance continues. You can almost smile as spindle fibers fuss like eager stagehands tugging chromosomes to opposite wings, while repair enzymes quietly tidy the script with commas you didn't know you needed. And one gamete arrives minimalist as the other shows up with the whole toolkit. Traditions starting early. Once you can remix, you begin to rehearse stay. After division, a few daughter cells decide not to drift apart. They stick, At first by accident, then on purpose, gluing together with sugars and proteins you invent for the occasion. Adhesion molecules become the planet's first gentle handshakes, Catherine-like grips, integrin-style anchors, a little extracellular matrix for comfort. You form chains, sheets, then hollow balls wobbling in the current. It turns out that being many opens doors a solitary cell can't reach. Signals learn manners. Calcium flickers past messages. Small proteins knock politely. Could you be the tail? I'll handle food. You try division of labor the way a family tries chores, unevenly at first, then with relief. Some cells flatten to paddle, some grow hairs to stir, some park by the pantry and digest. In one green lineage, a shimmering sphere appears. Volvox, hundreds of cells in a tidy ball rolling through light, with a few privileged members quietly set aside as future germ cells. In another lineage, you practice sacrifice. Social amoebas wander alone until hunger calls, then aggregate by chemical text into a squirming slug that crawls to a good spot and sprouts a stalk and spore head. Many cells give up their own futures to hold everyone else high. Quirky tidbit to tuck under your pillow. Those amoebas vote with pulses of camp, a cellular group chat where mute buttons do not exist. You take cues from your neighbors, too. A modern cousin, the Choanoflagellata, forms star-like rosettes when a certain bacterium releases a sulfonolipid signal. Single cells respond by becoming a simple multicellular bloom. The moral is comfortable. Bodies are conversations, often started by someone you didn't think was invited. The ocean is a seminar now, every shore and shelf a chalkboard. With sticking comes shape. You build scaffolds that span more than one cell, align cilia into coordinated waves, and discover that a sheet bent into a tube is a miracle. Insides and outsides, spaces to digest, spaces to sense. Sponges arrive, simple and brilliant, sieving water through chambers lined with cells that look suspiciously like guanoflagellates. Tiny collars catching food while other cells hold the walls, and still others ferry nutrients. Mainstream fact, animals, metazoans, share genes for adhesion and signaling. Catherines, integrins, WNT pathways that underpin true multicellularity. Sponges, cnidarians, and bilaterians all decorate that shared toolkit in their own ways. You are drafting the first building code. You experiment with size. Bigger bodies shrug off grazers, reach new currents, and divide labor more finely. But big demands order. Apoptosis to sculpt and prune, checkpoints to prevent rebellion, a quiet contract that says, some of us will become germ, the rest will work and then rest. The city metaphor returns, wider now. Streets between tissues, couriers carrying hormones, a zoning board that very politely tells cells where to live. Failure, you learn, is dramatic. Success is a yawn. You aim for a yawn. Out in the sediment, the first macroscopic forms print their silhouettes. Soft-bodied Ediacaran creatures spread like delicate shadows. Fronds rooted to the mat, quilted ovals with faint ribs, leaf-like bodies nested on the seafloor. You. Still the you that is ancestry. Brush against Dickinsonia as it glides slowly over microbial carpets. Past Charnia discus waving in the current. Notice ranger morphs unfurling fractal fronds like slow fireworks reversed. They are quiet, soft, symmetrical in unfamiliar ways. Some with glide planes, some without mouths or obvious guts at all. The sea at dusk looks like a garden that dreamed of geometry. Are they animals? Algae? Lichens? A lost kingdom of quilted experiments? Historians still argue whether the Ediacaran biota are your older siblings or distant cousins, whether they used tissues like yours, whether they ate in your fashion, whether they left any descendants beyond trace ideas. You hum along with the debate and keep practicing bodiness. Muscle-ish contractions here, nervish coordination there, epithelia that hold a shape long enough to matter. You are also learning timing. Development steps become a script. Divide, position, specialize, repeat. Genes that once managed simple cell cycles now moonlight as architects. Hawks-like patterns whispering front-back, up-down. Gradients marking where an opening should be. The same molecules, reused, tell one cell to be skin and another to be muscle-ish, and a third to be the flagellum that moves the whole. It's thrift by genius, old tools, new building. 3 more light smiles on your way to sleep. First, your adhesion proteins form such strong friendships that when you try to separate the cells, they behave like toddlers at a playdate, sticky hands refusing goodbye. Second, your cilia beat in waves so satisfying that future humans will make looping GIFs and forget to sleep watching them. Third, one cell inevitably insists on being management and invents signaling molecules that are basically memos with perfume. Multicellularity is not a one-time revelation, but a habit many lines adopt. Animals, plants, fungi, brown and red algae, even some bacteria that build filaments and fruiting bodies. The world starts layering scales, microbial films, multicellular mats, soft gardens, and the interactions thicken. Predation sharpens, defenses stiffen, movement gets coordinated. You are learning to be a body the way you learned to be a cell. By trying, failing, and keeping whatever works one tide longer than before. Night in the shallows glows faintly green. Colonies roll like sleepy planets, fronds lean, sponges whisper water through themselves by the gallon with the composure of librarians. Sex hums quietly beneath it all. Meiosis offline now, gametes set for dawn. You lie back in the current, still second person in a first body, and feel a sensation new to your lineage, parts behaving as one, a murmured consensus that says, your oldest laws still hold, boundaries, gradients, snacks. But now there are roles and rhythms and a hush of shared intention. You are almost ready to see, to sense edges and flashes and shadows, to accelerate change until the fossil record looks like a firework. Not yet. For tonight, feel the gentle tug of adhesion, the soft shuffle of genes crossing over, the early choreography of many becoming one. The moon writes long ladders of light on the water, and your cilia climb them in your sleep. The cold loosens its grip, the lid lifts, and light, actual, busy, gossiping light, pours down the water column. Oxygen is steadier. Minerals have been ground from continents by ice and rain and ferried to the sea like gifts. Your multicellular rehearsals turn into an opening night. In a geological blink, bodies diversify into a gallery of possibilities, like a child given every crayon at once. You do what you always do: boundaries, gradients, snacks. But now you add teeth, armor, muscle, and most consequentially, ways to notice what's coming. The world begins to see itself. Small things go first, as they often do. tiny shells, tubes, cups. A confetti of small, shelly fossils scatter across the sediments. Some are defensive spikes, some are housing, some are experiments that don't renew their lease. You feel the logic. If your neighbor is getting better at nibbling, you get better at not being nibbled. Biomineralization sweeps the seas as calcium carbonate and phosphate are drafted into service. The mud that once printed only soft fronds now records harder signatures, cogs and cones, plates and collars. Then the curtain pulls wide. In a span of tens of millions of years, the Cambrian, beginning around 541 million years ago, most of the basic animal body plans you'll ever use make their debut. Sponges refine their plumbing. Cnidarians wave tentacles armed with stings. Worms diversify, some bristled, some armored, some burrowing with new enthusiasm. Arthropods arrive with jointed exoskeletons and a serious work ethic. Early chordates test a stiffening rod down the back and whisper about futures with spines. Mainstream fact: exceptional fossil beds like the Chengjiang, China, and the Burgess Shale, Canada, preserve this moment with astonishing detail, keeping soft tissues that normally vanish. Gills, guts, eyes, and all the indecisive parts in between. Paleontologists will spend happy lifetimes arguing over them with the focused joy of people who bring their own rulers to museums. You move, not as a sheet, but as a creature with fronts and backs, insides and outsides, decisions and consequences. Burrows penetrate deeper into sea-floor sediments, disrupting the old microbial carpets and stirring oxygen into mud in what geologists like to call the agronomic revolution. The ground itself changes character. Fewer laminated mats, more churned living rooms. If the Ediacaran felt like a library after hours, the Cambrian feels like a market at noon, organized risk, friendly elbows, and the eyes. Oh, the eyes. Photoreceptors that once counted as simple light alarms assemble into organs with lenses and resolution. Trilobites wear compound eyes made from calcite crystals, each lens a tiny rock window focusing the world onto retinas. Anomalocaris hoists huge compound eyes, thousands of facets that make it a connoisseur of motion. Paired with grasping frontal appendages and a circular mouth studded with plates, it cruises the water column like a baguette-sized rumor with intentions. You, in whatever lineage you are borrowing tonight, feel sight changing the rules. To be seen is to need disguise. To see is to plan ahead. Predation becomes choreography rather than collision. Historians still argue whether the explosion is truly explosive, a rapid evolutionary radiation, or partly an artifact of preservation, with older soft-bodied forms simply lost to time. Whether rising oxygen crossed a threshold, genetic toolkits, including Hox-like patterning genes, unlocked latent possibilities, or ecological arms races drove the cascade. Whether the Ediacaran garden gave you a seed bank or a cautionary tale. They also still argue whether celebrity weirdos belong where we think they do. The debates are affectionate and occasionally spicy. Your lineage smiles and keeps adapting. Quirky tidbit to tuck beside the trilobite. Hallucigenia, a spiky little worm from the Burgess Shale, was drawn upside down for years. Scientists put the spines on the ground and the soft tentacles in the air, until better fossils showed the legs were legs after all. Opabinia shows up with 5 eyes and a flexible snorkel nose tipped with a grasping claw, which is simultaneously adorable and effective. Early reconstructions made entire lecture halls giggle. which is not the worst defense strategy. Even your mistakes are charming at this stage, like installing a door upside down and discovering your cat prefers it. Below the spectacle, the chemistry is familiar. Your muscles pull with sliding filaments that run on ATP from mitochondria. Your nerves, where you have them, pass signals with ion gradients and neurotransmitters. Your tissues hold together with adhesion proteins you wrote in the multicellular rehearsals. But now you layer systems. Sensory maps feed into ganglia. Ganglia coordinate limbs. Limbs coordinate hunts and escapes. A trilobite's coordinated leg wave is just cilia choreography writ large, and it is as soothing to watch as a well-organized parade. Predators sharpen, prey innovate. Some of you burrow deeper and develop armored heads to plow sediment. Some flatten and camouflage. Some grow spines, some thicken shells and lock down. Some abandon armor for speed and agility. Molting arrives as a strategy. Grow in jumps, soft and anxious between exoskeletons, then harden like confidence returning after a haircut. Trilobites effectively wear rock sunglasses all day and never complain. Anomalocaris is a shrimp, only to people who've never met a shrimp, and is frankly offended at the comparison. And early worms invent the first open-concept living by turning the seafloor into a maze of tunnels your future real estate agent would call cozy with great natural light, which is generous. Currents carry larvae to new homes. Life cycles split into stages with different jobs. Feed here, metamorphose there. Sex, already ancient, finds theatrical flair. Timing, signals, dances written in chemical plumes. Development gets stricter. Genes that once wore many hats now specialize. Others, the master regulators, step to the front and conduct. The toolkit you assembled earlier proves wonderfully reusable. By changing where and when you express familiar parts, you sculpt new forms without inventing a whole warehouse of parts from scratch. It's economy with panache. Elsewhere in the mix, early chordates like Pikaia and later Milocunmingia test notochords and segmented muscles. Flimsy for now, but faithful. Tiny spines on their backs are whispers of future vertebrae. A dorsal nerve cord suggests brighter thoughts to come. They are small, nervous swimmers threading between larger dramas, and you feel an ancestral tug you can't name yet. One that will lead to jaws, fins, lungs, and late-night documentaries with dramatic strings. The seafloor neighborhoods diversify. Reef-like structures rise not just from microbes, but from animals. Archaeocyathids, sponge-like reef builders, cementing together into habitats that host buzzing communities. In their shade, mudstone plains preserve trackways. Jointed feet tip-tap across, pause, then scuff where someone changed their mind. The world has invented hesitation, which is a complicated way of saying the world has invented memory. All this bustle runs on oxygen and minerals and time, but also on a new social contract. Eat without ending the game, defend without quitting it. The more intricate the web, the richer the opportunities. Scavengers thrive on leftovers. Parasites experiment with boldness. Commensals discover rent control by living on hosts without paying much. Every innovation elsewhere becomes either a resource or a problem for you, which is how you like it, something to solve while you hum. From the shore, if you could stand there, the Cambrian Sea is busy, but not yet green with forests. The continents are barren rock and sand. Tides still sweep and pull under the moon's silver. Storms still scour shelves. Sunlight still pours down like warm coins. At night, bioluminescent cousins flicker. Daylight brings shimmer off trilobite armor and the dark glide of something about to be named. The soundtrack is soft grinding, crackle of molting, the whisper of cilia and limbs beating in metronomic waves. You carry forward your earlier jokes and lessons. Boundaries, gradients, snacks. Still true, only with better recipes. Energy is cheap thanks to mitochondria. Sex shuffles the cards. Adhesion lets you build rooms. Signaling tells the rooms what to do. Eyes keep you from walking into the furniture. You are, to borrow a modern phrase, iterating rapidly with user feedback. Your beta testers are toothy and unforgiving. Your patch notes are written in shell and scar. Historians still argue whether predation was the spark that lit this fire or merely one of the first big logs to catch. Whether oxygen rose just in time or had been waiting patiently. Whether the genetic constraints loosened or the ecological theater suddenly acquired better lighting. For you, living through it, the answers are less important than the rhythm. Try, test, keep, repeat. The ocean, for the first time, has the feel of a crowd where everyone is interesting and slightly dangerous. Rest your eyes. Compound, camera, or future. The parade will continue for millions of years, refining joints and jaws, drafting blueprints for brains. But tonight's image is simple. A trilobite cresting a Cambrian sand wave, lenses glittering, a soft worm disappearing into a spiral burrow, a quilted oddity hovering with 5 eyes and a gentle vacuum snorkel. And you, in all of them, practicing the art of being an animal. The water is bright with possibility. You breathe, gill, skin, or whole body, and the world breathes with you. Lift your gaze from the busy Cambrian shallows to the continents beyond the surf line, and you see nothing. No shade, no grass, no hum of insects. The land is a quiet expanse of bare rock, wind-combed sand and dust. Waves comb beaches that end in rust-colored cliffs. Tides breathe and retreat, leaving salt rims like forgotten teacups. If you could step out in your current form, you would fry under unfiltered ultraviolet in about the time it takes to regret your life choices. Ozone is building, but the ground has no blanket yet. Think of it as a planet with excellent countertops and absolutely no furniture. The first green thinks small. Not forests, not even lawns. Just brave slicks clinging to the spray zone where waves mist rock, and in the mucus of stream banks that run down to the sea. Your algae cousins, long at home in coastal pools, learn to endure brief drying intervals. They thicken their skins with waxy cuticles so water doesn't wick away. They invent pores with shutters, stomata, that can crack open to breathe and clamp shut to avoid desiccation. Threads creep a few centimeters above the splash and hold that precarious ledge. The color is not a field's green, but a green you have to kneel to notice. Mainstream fact: by the Middle Ordovician, tiny fossils, spores with trilete marks, show up in rocks on multiple continents. Evidence that simple land plants were already completing life cycles ashore around 470 million years ago. A bit later, the earliest known vascular plants, rhiniophytes like Cooksonia, stand thumb-high with simple branching stems and spore tips, plumbing themselves with xylem tubes so water can rise from damp ground into the air. Even these minimalist antennae mark a revolution. Bodies engineered to be upright where water isn't holding you up. Before those pioneers take root, microbial and lichen crusts test the land. Cyanobacteria make filmy carpets. Fungi partner with algae to form lichens that stain rock in continents of delicate grit. Their acids etch minerals. Their bodies trap dust. When they die, their crumbs become the planet's first shy soil. The smell you think of as after rain. Petrichor belongs already to their chemical signatures. You breathe imaginary air, and a ghost of that scent arrives, earthy, sweet, almost like bread that remembers stone. You sense immediately that land will change you. Roots go hunting. They push into hairline cracks and pry them wider with freeze-thaw, with organic acids, with an insistence that would make any landlord nervous. Sand grains meet plant glue and stick into clumps. Clumps hold a drop of water long enough for a filament to live a little longer. The filament's life creates more crumbs. A ladder appears, rung by microscopic rung, from naked rock to something that can hold footprints. Historians still argue whether the earliest true settlers were more like hardy liverworts and mosses hugging dampness, or whether vascular miniatures with simple pipes grabbed a beachhead first. They argue whether many lineages crept up in parallel along streams and seeps, or whether one audacious group jumped first and pulled the rest along. They also quarrel, cheerfully, about where the best safe houses were. Tidal flats salted by mist, spring-fed seeps, or river margins where floods wrote brief permission slips. As the greening begins, the air listens. Those first plant skins and pores call the ancient choreography of gas exchange. Inhale carbon dioxide, exhale oxygen, stitch sugars from light, and stack them into cellulose so you can stand. Oxygen rises locally, brushing rock with a sharper chemistry than before. Thin soils trap water, and water keeps nutrients cycling near the surface instead of rushing straight back to the sea. The day's heat swings soften one leaf at a time. This is terraforming as lullaby, not drama. Boundaries, gradients, snacks. Only now the boundary has stomata. The gradient runs from root wet to leaf dry, and the snack is sunlight wrapped in sugar. You build networks. Underground, fine rootlets braid with threads of fungi, mycorrhizae, trading minerals for carbohydrates with the efficiency of a good farmer's market. Neither partner can do alone what the partnership achieves. Phosphorus mined from stubborn grains, nitrogen coaxed loose by bacteria and handed up the chain, carbon leaked down as tips for good service. The real city of the early land is below the surface. Hushed traffic, quiet deals, long friendships, quirky tidbit to tuck beside your pillow. In the Devonian that will follow, a giant called Prototaxites rises on barren hills, towering trunk-like columns up to 8 meters tall. For years, people thought they were trees. Now most agree they were colossal fungi, or lichen-like partnerships, a surreal skyline predating forests. Picture a world where the tallest trees are soft, strange mushrooms, nature's early attempt at a lamppost before bulbs were invented. You are not there yet, but the scaffolding for such oddities is already going up in the soil. A shield grows overhead. Oxygen in the upper atmosphere arranges itself into ozone, and the parasol thickens. Ultraviolet eases by degrees. Your cuticles and pores need not fight alone against the sky. A planetary filter joins the union. This is not noticeable in a single lifetime, but over millions of afternoons, the sun becomes less like a scolding and more like a steady employer. Mossy mats venture a little farther from the splash. Cooksonia raises another centimeter, spindles branching like punctuation learning its commas. The continents themselves are not static backdrops. They raft, they collide. They lift mountain belts that weather into silt that feeds deltas where plants can breathe easier. Winds ferry dust inland, seeding sterile flats with a starter culture of microbes. Streams braid into floodplains that flood and retreat, laying down wet intervals with just enough patience for green to hold. If you squint, you can see shorelines stitched with crusty mats, isolated knobs tufted with moss, and ribbon banks of the earliest vascular stems catching light long enough to matter. You prepare the house for guests you haven't invented. Plant bodies add roughness to the ground, slowing wind near the surface so spores and, later, seeds can fall without being flung to the next county. Root webs stitch slopes so rains don't strip them naked. Litter builds, retains moisture, and invites detritivores to the party. Carbon that might have fled back to the ocean starts getting locked in peats and shales. From offshore, the sea smells just a little different when the wind changes. Loamy, living, full. Not everything is applause. With stomata comes the ancient problem of water lost for food gained. With height comes the physics of plumbing and the gamble of standing in a breeze. With life on land comes fire. Once enough oxygen and dry matter gather to make sparks more than gossip. But your strategy has always been the same. Keep what works and try what doesn't again with a tweak. A waxier skin here, pores that listen harder there, a pinch more lignin in a stem that dreams of being a branch. The first liverwort that invents a cuticle experiences the primordial version of "I finally bought a good raincoat." The earliest stomata act like anxious window openers, up, down, as clouds wander by, and every new root seems to think it's a crowbar and tests the warranty on every crack it meets. Mainstream fact to anchor your drowsing. By the Silurian early Devonian, centimeter-tall plants with true vascular tissue, sporangia at their tips, and regularly branching stems are common, and terrestrial arthropods, millipede-like detritivores and scorpion cousins, leave trackways among them. But tonight's focus is the green. The fact that plants, by simply being themselves, rewrote atmosphere, water cycles, and erosion rates. They turned continents from reflecting slabs into sponges. You almost feel the air thicken and sweeten. Clouds form differently over green. Rain patterns shift as roughness drags moisture from sky to ground. Rivers begin to meander where once they sprinted, their banks stitched against collapse by invisible hands. The tone of wind changes, the hiss of grains replaced in places by the sibilant brush of tiny leaves. A color appears at horizons that have been bone and rust forever. And even if it is only a notch of green, your eyes, trained by a late future to crave it, relax. Historians still argue whether early land photosynthesizers nudged oxygen high enough to flirt with fires this early, or whether charcoal's true bonfire era waits for forests. Whether the earliest soils were already alive with complex food webs, or more like crunchy rugs with a few tenants. Whether lichen and liverwort dominance lingered longer than our bias for tall things admits. The debates are sweet, because they all agree on the poem. Rock, written upon by life, becomes different rock. This is not yet the world of towering trees and dragonfly-wide shadows. That will come soon, and you will breathe deeper when it does. But you are standing at the hinge. The barren continents have met their slow tailor. Roots keep working the hems. Pores keep learning to time their size. Tall is a word plants are practicing in whispers. Somewhere between surf and seep, a Cooksonia stem holds a sporangium to the sun, and spores drift like dust motes toward ground that, for the first time, will hold them and say, "Stay." Green stops whispering and starts singing. The ribbons and tufts of early land turn into sprawling, swampy forests, and the air grows heavy with the breath of plants. Ferns the size of houses lift fronds like cathedral fans. Giant club mosses and horsetails stack jointed columns into dim, damp avenues. The ground is a springy quilt of peat and roots. Pools mirror frond lace and a low, green light. You walk. Well, not quite yet, but you can feel the invitation. As dragonfly cousins the size of hawks patrol above still water, wings buzzing like silk saws. The world smells of wet bark, resin, and the first faint hint of coal that doesn't know it's coal. Your lungs are not here yet, but the air seems intent on practicing for them. Mainstream fact: during the late Carboniferous, atmospheric oxygen rises to extraordinary levels, likely over 30% compared to today's 12 to 21%, and that rich air helps fuel giant arthropods such as Meganeura, dragonflies with wingspans over 2 feet, and Arthropleura, millipede relatives reaching 2 meters. More oxygen means easier breathing for creatures that rely on diffusion. It also means a sky that takes sparks seriously. Nights hum with life, and occasionally with lightning's opinions. The forests build themselves like patient engineers. Trunks, lycopsids with scaly bark, calamites with bamboo poise, anchor into muck with roots that web outward more than they dive. Spore cones lift like lanterns. Breezes carry dust-fine futures into fog. When the trees fall, and they fall often in waterlogged soils, their bodies pile into anoxic swamps that cannot quite digest them. Layer upon layer presses into peat, then into coal seams. Time's slow savings account that future hands will withdraw and spend in a century-long spree. You don't know that yet. You only know the hush of an under canopy where light arrives in green coins. Under this roof, streams creep. Banks are stitched by roots that learned their job in the Silurian and now do it expertly. Channels meander and whirl. Log jams form cities for new tenants. In shaded shallows, the old story leans in with a new chapter. Your lobe-finned ancestors lurk where water brushes air. Their fins are not mere paddles. Inside are bones, 1 stout element, then 2, then a bouquet of little rods, familiar to your future wrist and ankle. Lungs, once a buoyancy trick or a drought insurance policy, open like secret pockets. Gills still do most of the work, but when water goes stale or shrinks to warm, hypoxic puddles, a mouth breaks the surface and gulps. You are that mouth, rising into half-light. The world above the meniscus is different, denser with scent, louder with leaves, complicated by gravity in a way water forgives. Your lobe fin braces into mud. The joint at the base, humerus-like, rolls and lifts, the 4-element swings. Something in you learns a new verb. Press. Your ribs are still soft. Your hips are a suggestion, but the bank holds, and a body the shape of a fish with a neck does a small and private push-up. Quirky tidbit. In Polish limestone, trace fossils from Zakoumi quarry look like tetrapod footprints older than any limb-bearing body fossil, suggesting that someone tried walking before you found their bones. It's as if footprints signed the guest book before the guests arrived. Historians still argue whether you first nosed onto land to chase stranded snacks, insects and little crustaceans browsing the leaf litter, to escape aquatic predators with too many teeth, to cross between shrinking pools in drought, or to warm your eggs and bodies in sunlit shallows. They also argue whether limbs evolved primarily for bottom walking underwater before they ever met air. The debate is cordial, sprinkled with fossil necks and wrists. You, with mud on your chin, politely refrain from comment and keep experimenting. Names gather around your experiments in the long after. Forms like Eusthenopteron and Panderichthys fiddling with fin bones. Tiktaalik lying there with a flat head, a mobile neck, and wristish joints like hardware you didn't know you'd ordered. Acanthostega and Ichthyostega carrying more toes than later fashions will allow, still at home in water but trying steps like a child testing a staircase. Mainstream fact: the tetrapod limb is homologous across this lineage. One bone, two bones, many, then digits. A pattern you will carry into ballet studios and basketball courts without ever sending a thank you note to the Devonian. The forests respond to these shy arrivals with hospitality and hazard. The damp land offers food everywhere: detritus, soft-bodied arthropods, spores like tiny energy pills, and also obstacles: roots to trip you, logs to climb, air that steals moisture from skin meant for water. You solve problems by half measures. Spend most hours in the shallows, breathe when you must, keep skin wet, use your tail like an oar, your limbs like crutches that spread weight and find purchase. Your skull bones fuse and loosen in new patterns to bear stress. Your ear bones, once for jaw hinge business, begin to moonlight in hearing airborne sound. Exaptations stack like clever hacks. 3 soft smiles to keep your pace sleepy. First, your earliest fingers are not for piano. Think splayed, stubby props more than dexterous digits. Second, every attempt to coordinate 4 limbs and a tail across slick peat is basically the universe inventing physical comedy. Only you're very dignified about it. Third, giant millipedes look terrifying until one politely changes lanes to avoid you like the best sort of subway commuter. Every success wants a system. The shoulder girdle frees from the skull, granting a neck that can aim without turning the whole body. Vertebrae stiffen behind to resist land's push. A sacrum begins to tie spine to hind limb. Lungs grow roomier. Heart's partition flow to keep oxygen-rich and oxygen-poor blood from mixing quite so much. Skin thickens in patches, still happiest in dampness. You don't conquer land. You frequent it, like a favorite cafe with questionable seating. Your young probably still need water. Your eggs, jelly-bound, still drink from ponds. Your voice, if it whispers at all, is more bubble than call. Meanwhile, the arthropods are already in love with the surface. Millipedes graze on fallen fronds, turning forest litter into soil. Centipedes hunt by night with delicate cruelty that we will later call efficient predation. Early arachnids test silk and venom. Springtails bounce in drifts like living punctuation. Their tracks stipple mud like code. Your new limbs write a bolder script across those lines. Belly drags, odd little gaits, push-off arcs where toes, if that's what they are, try for grip and leave crescents. In the canopy, a word that here means 10 or 20 meters of layered fronds, spore rain falls, and spores do what spores do best. Be everywhere. Later, you'll invent seeds with food packs and weatherproof shells. For now, the forest disperses like rumors. Fires are possible in this oxygen-rich world, but the swampiness keeps many flames short. When they do run, charcoal marks the page. Glossy black seams through green stories. You learn to read it as a pause, not an end. The water remains home, and not just for you. Sharks patrol deeper channels with the serenity of old money. Ray-finned fishes, your cousins who will one day win the numbers game, refine light bones and fast jaws. Armored plecoderms bow out with a flourish. Reefs, when not sulking from changes in chemistry, host forests of their own in coral and crinoid. You cross between worlds the way a shuttle crosses a harbor, timetables set by tide, temperature, and courage. If you listen for a callback, it's everywhere. Stomata that practiced opening and closing now pump a forest's breath. Roots that tried prying at cracks now hold landscapes. Ozone that thickened for algae's sake now spares tender skin. The moon still writes silver on pond skins and tugs at amphibian hearts. Boundaries, gradients, snacks. On land they become skin, slope, and leaf litter. In water they're still gill, current, and plankton. You are fluent in both dialects, if not yet eloquent. First breath sounds grand, but in truth it's a series of little breaths at surfaces, quick sips when a pool stales, longer drafts when you linger on a bank, a panicked gulp when something with too many teeth noses your tail. Then one evening as mist threads among club moss trunks and the world glows with the particular melancholy of green twilight, you haul more of you out than usual. Fins plant, ribs hold, mouth opens, lungs drink, and nothing hurts. The noise is soft, a wet sigh, and you do not die. You are not good at it yet, but you are doing it. This is your ancestor, and the bank remembers. Historians still argue whether those steps happened first in the Devonian's waning warmth or in early Carboniferous hush, whether toes started at 8 and winnowed to 5 through fashion or function, whether the earliest walkers left tracks in tidal flats under a crescent moon or in ferny inland pools with beetle-scented air. The arguments are lullabies to you now. You keep practicing. Sleep in the knowledge that you have one hand, bone, 2 bones, many digits, on land and one tail in water, that forests have made the air fat and kind, that the road ahead holds amniote eggs, scales, fur, and antlers. But not tonight. Tonight, you are a lobe-finned body, breathing a little, pushing a little, listening to leaves drip. The first step is not pretty, it is patient, and you have always been good at that. The green twilight of swamps thins, and time leans forward. The forests you've learned to frequent stretch across low continents that creak toward one another until land clicks into a single supercontinent, Pangaea, hugging an ocean called Panthalassa, with a side basin we'll later dub Tethys. Shorelines simplify, interiors sprawl. Where water once threaded everywhere, an arid heartland yawns, a sun-baked plaza with long seasons and longer horizons. Plants answer with new armor, seeds wrapped in weatherproof coats, wood stiff with resin, needle-leaved conifers that shrug at drought and wind. Your amphibious habit still comforts you, but your lineage feels an invitation to carry water with you. The amniote egg arrives, its own pond, sealed with a membrane, a private nursery you can set down on sand. It's the most elegant canteen you've ever not invented. Synapsids, your mammal-leaning kin with single holes behind their eye sockets, claim the day with brisk jaws and barrel chests. Some browse low shrubs, some chase. some dig. Reptile cousins diversify too. A few experiment with upright strides, others with sails that catch morning light, like solar panels with opinions. Insects whir through dry air. Some wear mouthparts like tiny pocket knives. Others try song. Rivers meander, then vanish into salt flats. Sand seas march under moonlight. On certain evenings, the wind smells of resin, dust, and distance. The world is stable, not in the sleepy way of the Carboniferous swamps, but in the confident way of a big country with one weather forecast, seasonal extremes. Beneath your feet, though, the planet holds a heat you will not like. Far to the north, in what will be called Siberia, cracks open in the crust. Not neat volcanoes, but gaping wounds from which lava floods and floods and floods. Basalt pours over the land in stacked sheets, an obscene layer cake with no party to attend. This does not happen on a weekend. It's a million-year tantrum punctuated by pauses and aftershocks. The air first fills with sulfur aerosols and ash, softening sunlight and giving the world a brief grey fever. Then the deeper chemistry takes the stage. CO2 by the trillions of tons, methane coaxed from warmed clathrates, halogens that insult the ozone. Your lungs, if you have them, file a strongly worded letter with management. Mainstream fact: around 252 million years ago, at the end of the Permian period, Earth suffers the most severe mass extinction in its record, the Great Dying, erasing roughly 95 to 96% of marine species and about 70% of terrestrial vertebrate species. The Siberian traps flood basalts coincide closely with this catastrophe in time and misery. Coral reefs collapse. Trilobites, which rode out so many crises in rock sunglasses, finally bow offstage. Whole guilds of brachiopods, crinoids, and ammonoids dim or vanish. On land, forests thin to patches. Synapsid lineages blink out. Insects endure their own rare extinction pulse. You can feel the ocean change tone. Warming at the surface slows circulation. The deep holds its breath. Anoxia spreads. Water runs out of oxygen and fails to welcome breathers. In places, the sea turns eoxinic, rich in hydrogen sulfide that smells like rotten eggs and acts like trouble. Purple and green sulfur bacteria, old friends from oxygen-poor eras, bloom in photic waters, painting layers lurid. The chemistry nips at ozone, and UV bites harder again. Carpets of life turn to slicks. Shorelines smell like endings. The rock record writes grief in several hands. There's a coal gap, a pause in coal formation after the forests fall. Swamps cease to lay down their patient black savings. Some layers show bursts of malformed plant spores, as if sunlight scorched germ lines or toxins fussed with development. There's even a fungal spike in some sections, a bloom of fungal spores that some read as a world briefly dominated by rot. Quirky tidbit to tuck beneath your pillow. The fungal spike has fueled campfire stories about a planet briefly turned into a moldy compost bin. Others point out that not all spikes are global, and algae can impersonate fungi in tiny fossils. Either way, it's not a great time to be a tree. Historians still argue whether the Siberian traps alone could drive the whole disaster, or whether the kill was a team effort. Massive volcanism, plus supercontinent climate weirdness, plus methane burps from clathrates, plus ozone damage, plus ocean stagnation, perhaps with a dash of nickel-rich aerosols turbocharging microbes. They still argue whether there was a single sharp pulse or multiple blows across a few 100,000 years, whether an impact chimed in, whether the poison was more sulfur, more CO2, or more hydrogen sulfide. The debates are warm and occasionally smoky. The rocks are patient. You are busy surviving. How you survive is not glamorous. You go small and stubborn. You favor burrows that hold a little moisture and defy heat. You carry food in your body plans. Fat stores, bone marrow, hard seeds in cheek pouches if you have cheek pouches. You lower your expectations for oxygen, learn to take short sips, and keep your eggs close to damp shade. Your metabolism, honed in forests, edits itself for deserts with a few strokes. Tighter skin, thriftier kidneys, a taste for what is available rather than what is ideal. Somewhere a synapsid invents naps as a survival strategy and never looks back. A seed fern mutters self-care and drops its leaves preemptively. And a burrowing creature pops up, sniffs the air, and decides the outside is still under construction. Check again next epoch. On land, the after is long. In the earliest Triassic, fossil assemblages sometimes look like a single name repeated too many times, and that name is often Lystrosaurus, a stocky, beaked synapsid with tusks and a barrel chest that parades across South Africa, India, and Antarctica like a determined vacuum cleaner. At some sites, it makes up most of the vertebrate bones, proof that generalists with simple tastes and sturdy builds can carry a biosphere when fashion collapses. If you need a mascot for grit, a pig beaver dog with an underbite qualifies. In the sea, survivors include thin-shelled ammonoids that later blossom into elegant spirals, bony fishes that will write future menus, and hardy sponges and bivalves that recolonize the benthos like patient custodians. They return slowly because warmth and weird chemistry keep resetting the stage. River systems swing to braided channels. Landscapes are flashy. Flood, drought, flood again. Forests try, fail, and try again. The sky gradually remembers how to rain in patterns, not tantrums. The moon still writes silver on whatever water remains at night. Ponds, player lakes, stitched-back rivers. The magnetosphere still hums, quiet as a bedside generator. Boundaries, gradients, snacks. You strip the hymn to its bare notes. Shelter, no shelter. Cooler, warmer. Anything edible, not. You practice those choices until they are reflex. You keep lineage alive by being unpretentious. If the Cambrian was creative and the Carboniferous lush, the Permian's end is administrative. Once luxurious budgets slashed to essentials, spreadsheets of survival taped to burrow walls. The planet, which is not unkind but is certainly busy, keeps writing the cleanup plan. Weathering of fresh basalt chews CO2, mountains raised by collisions erode and whisk carbon to the sea. Oceans, sluggish at first, recover circulation as gradients strengthen. Oxygen crawls back into the deep. In time, longer than a career, shorter than forever, reefs grow again with new partnerships. On land, ginkgos and conifers reclaim shade. Synapsids re-diversify into svelte hunters and small insect eaters. Archosaurs, reptilian relatives with upright legs and ambitions, find their stride along river margins. A new set of gambles rattles in its cup. Mainstream fact to steady your pulse. There have been 5 great mass extinctions in Earth's history by the classic count. This one sits at the bottom of the chart for severity. Yet life rebounds, and often the survivors write the next chapters more boldly than the lost ever did. Recovery after the end. Permian, though halting, sets the stage for a reptile-dominated world, and eventually for dinosaurs to take the marquee. Your line, small, warm-blooded tendencies still a rumor, keeps a seat in the balcony. 3 closing smiles as the dust settles. The first trilobite to miss this ending does so completely. A perfect Irish exit from history. The first conifer cone to ride a post-extinction breeze lands with unnecessary optimism and somehow is correct. The first Lystrosaurus to sneeze dust out of its beak probably invents the relatable "I'm doing my best" face. Lie low then. You are among the 5% that persist because you can eat broadly, hide well, and make more you with few demands. The heat will ebb, the chemistry will sweeten, rivers will find their manners. When the curtain rises, a new cast will own the stage. Reptiles with hips tuned for running, with eggs that laugh at drought, with lungs that don't file letters at every weather change. You will watch from the understory, quiet and busy, heart warm, eyes bright at night. The great dying redraws the map, but it doesn't end the road. It is a hard comma in a long sentence you have been writing since vents breathed into dark water. Take a slow breath. Electron to acceptor if you must, lung to air if you are lucky, and feel the chain hold. The fire below has had its say. Tomorrow, the world will rehearse strides that make thunder. You wake to footsteps that sound like weather. The after of the great dying has finally become a morning, and the runners you glimpsed on river margins are now everywhere. Ankles tucked beneath hips, chests opened wide, tails counterbalancing like living metronomes. Archosaurs, then a particular archosaur set with Saurischian and Ornithischian dreams, write speed and posture into the ground. Small, hollow-boned newcomers with grasping hands and 3 main toes flicker through thickets. Long-necked browsers test the sky. Armored grazers lay down roads of footprint ovals. Your world hums with a cadence that will hold for more than 100 million years. A Mesozoic heartbeat that says, go. Pangaea doesn't stay one piece. Cracks thread the supercontinent. Flood basalts flare along rifts. The land splits, and new shorelines lace the map. Wetter belts return. Deserts shuffle. Monsoons practice choreography. Where the Triassic ends in its own smaller extinction pulse, the Jurassic opens like a window. Forests of conifers and cycads settle in. Ferns embroider the understory. Horsetails make shady ditches that smell clean and green. Mainstream fact: dinosaurs, first appearing by 230 million years ago, dominate terrestrial ecosystems throughout the Jurassic and Cretaceous, while their close but not dinosaur cousins, pterosaurs, own the sky, and marine reptiles, ichthyosaurs, plesiosaurs, mosasaurs later, rule the seas. The age of reptiles is less a slogan than a travel advisory. You, though, your line is small and quick and hot inside. In moonlit hours, the forest floor is yours. You keep to burrows and hollows by day, nose lift the night like a curtain, and sprint between ferns with a heart that knows how to idle low and then flare. Insects, eggs, seeds, the occasional lizard tail. Calories are scavengers' choice, and you are not picky. Your teeth are becoming fine tools, differentiated into cutters, piercers, and crushers. Your jaw joint changes and frees tiny bones to wander earward and learn to listen. Fur wraps your metabolism in silence. Waiting is not passive, it's training. The morning belongs to others. Sauropods, first tentative, then outrageous, step into light and rewrite scale. Necks like elevated roads sweep across canopies. Air sac lungs lighten bodies and turn breaths into bellows that move air like weather systems contained. Diplodocus drapes a shadow longer than an alley. Brachiosaurus parks front legs like columns and eats from the second story with zero shame. Between their pillar legs, you whisk like a rumor, stopping to sniff resin and roll in it for reasons that are, frankly, your business. Where browsers browse, predators pace. Coelophysis flits thin and fast in Triassic memory. Later, allosauroids stride with open, serious faces. In the Cretaceous, tyrannosaurids perfect the big-headed, bone-crunching aesthetic with a bite that makes even fossilized prey wince. 3 soft smiles for nerves. The first time a juvenile tyrannosaur trips over a log and pretends it meant to do that, the forest diplomatically looks away. Stegosaurs angle their thagomisers toward problems with the unbothered certainty of a well-signed exit, and a flock of small, feathered maniraptorans invent the original angry chicken. Vibe and terrorize exactly the things that deserve it. Crickets and your late-night confidence. Your senses sharpen to fit the spaces giants cannot reach. You map the forest's geometry by smell and whisker tap. You memorize the creak that means tail coming versus the hush that means shadow overhead. Your paws learn bark and loam and the airy stepping stones of fern roots. When dawn yawns and the first sun shaft finds the ground, you're already home, curled in fur, heartbeat slowed to a hush that echoes the old snowball patience. Boundaries, gradients, snacks. Boundary is burrow and fur. Gradient is night to dawn and cool to warm. Snack is whatever fits between your incisors without a committee meeting. Historians still argue whether most dinosaurs ran hot like you, cold like their reptile cousins, or something in the middle. Mesothermy, a thrifty warmth that keeps pace without wasting fuel. They also argue whether sauropod tails cracked like whips, whether Spinosaurus swam like a heron or cruised like a crocodile with ambitions, and whether social behaviors, herding, brooding, coordinated hunts, were rule or exception. You, ears cocked in a burrow, file the debates under weather forecast, useful but not binding. Quirky tidbit to slide under your whiskers. For years, people repeated that Stegosaurus had a second brain in its hips. It didn't. There's an enlargement in the spinal cord region for nerves, but no backup brain. Another, fossil melanosomes in some feathered dinosaurs and early birds have let scientists propose colors. Ginger stripes on Sinosauropteryx, glossy blacks on Microraptor. So somewhere in your night garden, a small four-winged hunter might have shimmered like oil on water when the moon turned just right. Fashion existed long before runways. Time layers cultures of dinosaurs the way forests layer shade. Early Jurassic landscapes favor long-necked herds crossing floodplains with synchronized neck swinging that could make a metronome weep. Mid-Jurassic retools the cast across continents now farther apart. Cretaceous worlds unfurl new floras. Angiosperms, flowering plants, open up shop, writing partnerships with pollinating insects who trade nectar for courier service. Fruit arrives as the original "eat this, wear these seeds" home. You sample the new sweetness with the seriousness of a professional. Mainstream fact: flowering plants diversify through the Cretaceous, reshaping terrestrial ecosystems and likely nudging herbivore diets and insect evolution into brighter, buzzier directions. In the air, pterosaurs expand from sparrow and seagull sizes to creatures like Quetzalcoatlus, with wingspans rivaling small airplanes, lightweight frames with muscles strung tight as bowlines. Later, some small dinosaurs manage something bolder and stranger. They don't just glide, they flap. The first birds, theropods in sensible shoes, keep teeth for a while, then lose them, keep tails, then trim them, keep clawed hands on their wings, then decide that's clumsy on a coffee table and fuse their digits. Somewhere a nest cradles speckled eggs, and a parent's bones grow lightly on purpose. You cannot help noticing how often care enters the picture. Dinosaurs brood. Trackways suggest groups traveling together. Bone beds whisper of herds. Hollow-boned predators likely traded food with mates and nestlings. You do not invent tenderness. You inherit it and reshape it for your size and schedule. You tuck your young in fur on nights that smell like resin and rain. When thunder steps by, you press them to your chest and let the old magnetosphere hum, remind you that shields still work, even if they're silent. The oceans, too, write Mesozoic syllables. Ichthyosaurs, dolphin-shaped but emphatically reptilian, cut sleek arcs through green water. Plesiosaurs hoist swan necks from the waves and startle fishes into forgetting their plans. Later mosasaurs arrive with jaw hinges that read as impolite to future jaws. Reef builders change partners. Rudest bivalves stand in for corals for a while, proof that even ecosystems audition understudies. You nap in dune shade and imagine a world where your grandchildren swim with paddled paws and call it Tuesday. Not all giants are threats. A quarry's gap in the canopy is a sauropod's dining room and your pantry. A herd's passage lays tracks that fill with water and insects and the occasional seed. A cafeteria plan written in mud. Beneath a sun-warmed boulder, a scurry of tiny mammals takes a communal nap, and you understand why later poets will call such places hearths. You cannot out-eat a theropod or outstare a ceratopsian, but you can outweight weather, outsqueeze roots, and outsprint a shadow if it hesitates. The lesson you learned under ice and in vents holds. Survival is choreography in narrow spaces. 3 more soft jokes before you sleep. First, an ankylosaur tail club is the world's original "Please respect my personal space" sign, and it is written in fluent whack. Second, a hadrosaur's head crest is an entire brass section. Future paleontologists will blow air through casts and call it music. Which it is. Third, every time a small dromaeosaur fluffs its proto-feathers and tries to look bigger, a pine cone nearby does a better job and wins the intimidation contest by default. You remain in the shadows on purpose. Not because you cannot grow large, some mammals will, given the chance, but because darkness and modest size buy you options. Burrow, climb, slip, hide, raid, remember. Your brain grows in the pockets that count. Smell, hearing, curiosity. Your hand, with its 5 Devonian remembering digits, learns to turn things over just to see what's underneath. Your nights are schools, your days are quilts. When moonlight writes ladders across a slow creek, you drink and listen. Somewhere up canyon, a sauropod grinds trees into history. Somewhere downslope, a tyrannosaur drops a bone with a noise like a door closing. Above, a pterosaur sketches the same old silver lines you stared at as a microbe, a vent cat, a stromatolite whisperer. Continuity is comfort. The magnetosphere still sighs. The tilt still makes seasons. Gravity never forgets your address. The cast changes. The stagehands do not. Historians still argue whether the Mesozoic was a greenhouse without true ice caps, where the sea levels rose and fell in rhythm with sea floor spreading and mid-ocean ridge buoyancy, where the birds squeaked or honked or sang like living flutes among conifers. They argue with good humor, because the bones are exquisite and the questions kind. You take your place below all that certainty and uncertainty alike, and keep time. It is not your age, but it is your apprenticeship. You learn patience as a profession. You learn night vision as a language. You learn that hiding is not fear, but strategy. The world above you is spectacular. The world at your scale is sustainable. When the sky changes, and it will, you will already have the habits you need. For now, curl into fur, ears flicking, and let giant footsteps become the metronome that rocks you to sleep. It is an ordinary late Cretaceous afternoon, which is to say, not ordinary at all, if you have ears for thunder that walks. A hadrosaur herd breathes in a rising and falling hush as they crop cycads. A tyrannosaur lords over a sandbar, doing its best impression of a boulder that happens to blink. Above the tree line, a flock of toothed birds cuts V-shapes into warm air. Resin gleams where something bumped a conifer and left the tree to think about it. You, small and quick and dusk-colored, hold your breath in a burrow mouth and count the heartbeats between shadows. Somewhere, a juvenile with too much leg and not enough wisdom kicks a log and pretends it meant to. The day smells of sun on scale, fern dust, and river clay. High overhead, something the size of a small mountain has already committed to a line you cannot see. It crosses vacuum without ceremony. It does not negotiate. In the split between two blinks, a blink for it being about a second long and full of atmosphere, it steepens, shoves air aside faster than the air has ever been shoved, and becomes a white so bright it isn't a color anymore. There is no soundtrack yet. Approaches silence, and then it is everything. The visitor hits where shallow tropical sea kisses the edge of a peninsula you will someday call Yucatan, and writes its name into rock. Chicxulub. Mainstream fact: about 66 million years ago, an asteroid roughly 10 kilometers wide struck the Earth and left a crater 180 kilometers across, half buried beneath Mexico's Yucatan. Globally distributed iridium, shocked quartz, spherules, and a razor-thin clay line mark the blow, and that line sits at the boundary we call KPG. Add this arithmetic, kinetic energy equivalent to billions of Hiroshima bombs, delivered in less time than it takes you to forget the kettle. The details are terrible and precise. At impact, seabed rock vaporizes. The ocean piles up and runs out faster than the word tsunami can form in any mouth, because there are not yet mouths that say words. A curtain of incandescent droplets, melted earth thrown into the sky, arcs around the planet and begins to fall back through the air. Winds, the speed of ideas, tear forests flat within sight of the crater. Earthquakes ring the crust like a bell you can feel in your molars. A single day inherits too much weather. If you live on that coastline, you meet water first. In minutes to hours, a wall of sea hurries inland, turns forests into armfuls of splinters, carries stones as if they were polite suggestions, and then drags its treasure back toward the newly widened gulf. Farther away, what arrives instead is fire. The re-entering spherules heat the sky. An infrared pulse presses down like a terrible noon. Dry matter takes the hint and lights. Charcoal will later gloss pages of rock with black shine, and red skin will bloom on seeds where, improbably, some of them remain viable. You have always known heat. This is a new kind. The air goes strange. Dust and sulfate aerosols lofted from evaporated gypsum dim sunlight. Soot from global fires thickens the dim. Photosynthesis falters day by day. The warmth you feel at noon becomes a stale weakness. Evenings cool more than they should. Impact winter, future scientists will call it. Months to years of sky that won't cooperate, then longer, uneven years of climate trying to remember how to be weather. Ocean surfaces chill but stratify. Deep water sulks. Acidity nips at shells. Food webs, once taut and musical, begin to lose notes. If you are a giant who needs a lot of fresh plant every day, or a giant who needs a giant to eat who needs fresh plant every day, your spreadsheet gets ugly fast. Quirky tidbit. In North Dakota's Tanis deposit, fish fossils preserve tiny glassy microtectites jammed in their gills, as if they were breathing the skyfall. Some even trapped in amber like raindrops of stone held by tree tears. The site reads like a minute-by-minute diary of a very bad afternoon, down to waves sloshing the river from seismic shudders before the true oceanic tsunamis arrive. It is the kind of story a planet tells only once, and even then, not quietly. Historians still argue whether Deccan traps volcanism in India was a co-conspirator, warming and stressing ecosystems before and after the impact, or merely an unhelpful background condition, whether non-avian dinosaurs were already in gentle decline in some regions or humming along fine until the rock fell, whether the kill was a single short, sharp event, or a few pulses with brief, cruel reprieves. They still argue about the impact's angle and timing in relation to volcanism, and about how quickly different ecosystems collapsed and recovered. The debates are lively and careful. The iridium line does not care. If you are small, omnivorous, and unglamorous, you begin to matter. You are not picky about what passes as snack. Seed, egg, beetle, carrion, root. You were already the expert at roofs of dirt and rooms of leaf mold. When the first firestorms hiss out at the river edge, your home is below the heat. When the first weeks of dim arrive, you do not notice except that the big, two-legged thuds above grow fewer and then stop. The old rule returns with fresh authority. Boundaries, gradients, snacks. Boundary, burrow. Gradient, safe, cautious, warm, cool, light, dim. Snacks, yes, thank you, whatever fits. You are not alone in survival. Turtles wait in mud. Crocodilians remember that a good river solves many problems. Small lizards and snakes, frogs and salamanders, certain insects with life cycles that hoard energy in soil, all bide. Birds, those avian dinosaurs with streamlined skeletons and fast metabolisms, thread a needle some cousins cannot, and a lineage of feathers keeps making mornings. In the sea, a fraction of plankton stubbornly persists. Bottom dwellers that can eat yesterday do better than grazers that require the sun's new. But the coelurosaur with a serious face and a bone-crunching bite? The ports it requires. Prey availability, plant productivity, egg incubation, windows, juveniles that don't miss too many meals, close one by one with a sound like a soft latch. Mainstream fact to anchor your breath. The fern spike, a sharp rise in fern spores just above the boundary in many places, speaks to landscapes freshly burned and cleared, where the first wave of green belongs to opportunists with wind-carried dust for seeds. The world replants itself with pioneer courage. It smells briefly, like wet charcoal and new optimism. The long winter teaches odd lessons. Nights stretch, days squint. Your metabolism learns a quieter setting. You share tunnels with cousins you'd usually ignore. A cache of seeds you forgot becomes salvation in week 7 of the dim. Water continues to move, which is a mercy. Rivers remember where to go. Springs feed from rock that the shock did not erase. Lakes skin over with odd films and then clear. When ash settles out and sulfate clouds thin, the first green blushes return to banks and hills. Not yet flowers. Those will be back, don't worry. But patient fronds and conifer needles brave enough to point up. In the hush that follows catastrophe, you can hear 2 sounds distinctly. Insects working as if their contracts never lapsed, and tiny feet sampling new roots. You visit places you wouldn't have dared in the bright age. Under a fallen cycad's tangle, you find starch that survived the baking. In a hollow where resin pooled and char became glassy, you find trapped midges you cannot eat, but can investigate with your whiskers because curiosity is a muscle you've been strengthening since the Jurassic. Your nose catalogues ash like a librarian. Basalt here, gypsum there, something oceanic everywhere. You're young, because yes, you kept having them, tightly and quietly. Learn to dig early and to freeze at odd noises. Their ears are better than yours were. Their patience is innate. At some horizon that isn't a day, but will later be marked by a page in a book, you put your face above the burrow and do not smell smoke. A bird is talking in a bush with a voice you haven't heard in a while. The sun, though still chalked at the edges, is a disk again and not a rumor. In the distance, a copse of conifers lifts new green. The tyrannosaur does not arrive late to the scene, apologizing. The big shadow does not pass. You step out, belly low, and cross 10 feet of plain without dying. It is as ceremonial as a coronation and as modest as finding breakfast. You did not inherit the earth because you were noble. You inherited it because you fit into holes, literal and ecological, that catastrophe did not close. You eat broadly. You breed without delicate rituals. You handle cold rooms and hot rooms. You carry warmth inst and wear it as fur. You cache. You thrive in edges and under things, and for a while the world is mostly edges and under things. Later, you will stand up in daylight and call it noon. Not tonight. Tonight, you memorize a new sky and say softly, okay. Historians still argue whether recovery took hundreds of thousands or a few million years to feel like momentum, whether marine food webs found their feet first or terrestrial ones did, whether flowers' bright tricks sped the bounce. The arguments are part of the music. You have time for music now. The moon still writes ladders on water. The magnetosphere still hums its low reassurance. Gravity still remembers where you sleep. In the near future, the green will come back noisy. The air will smell like resin and pollen again. And in the long future, hoofbeats and howls and, eventually, crackling fires made on purpose will thread the nights. For now, the world is dim, quiet, and survivable, which is your favorite combination. Breathe in. The age of giants has ended. The meek did not inherit the earth by accident. They wrote the application early and kept it under a rock. Your time has come, and you've trained for it your entire life in the shadows. The long, dim lifts, and you slip from the burrow into a world with roomy mornings again. The great thuds are gone. The spaces between trunks feel wider. The buffet is modest but open. You are small, warm, and impatient, and that combination is the age of mammals in a sentence. You take the night shift you've mastered and begin applying for day jobs. Carefully at first, because hawks are just dinosaurs with better marketing, but soon and often, because the vacancies are everywhere. Life rethreads the web with new fibers. Some of your cousins go long-legged and light-footed, turning floodplains into racetracks. Some choose claws and stealth in underbrush and become rumors with whiskers. Some return to water, start as ankle-deep dabblers, then push off, body by body, until paddling becomes swimming, and swimming becomes something else entirely. Mainstream fact. Within the Eocene, whales evolve from land-dwelling artiodactyl relatives. Think Pakicetus listening to riverbanks, Ambulocetus hauling through shallows, and later Basilosaurus rolling its serpentine bulk through warm seas, retaining in their ankles the double-pulley astragalus bone that tattles on their even-toed ancestry. You've invented a submarine out of a jogger, because that's what you do when the world asks for reinvention. In air, you try a bolder trick. Bats appear, real powered flight, not gliding pretend. Fossils like Onychonectaris and Icaronectaris preserve wings stretched between impossibly long fingers, and in one case, little claws on each digit like a careful climber who hasn't returned the borrowed spikes yet. You learn to echolocate the way you learned gradients at the vents, by sending questions and listening hard to the answers. Night becomes an instrument. Insects are notes you pluck out of the dark. On land, teeth diversify into cutlery sets, shears for hunters, grinders for grazers, multi-purpose molars for generalists. Hooves concentrate mass on elegant toes and turn planes into metronomes. Claws articulate plans in loam. The planet's thermostat, fidgety as ever, stages a fever, the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, when carbon floods the air and the world blushes warm. You and your neighbors respond by moving, shrinking, blooming, and pausing in 100 ways that all read as adapt. Later, cooling arrives and resculpts oceans and wind. Antarctica grows a crown of ice. Currents reorganize like furniture after a move. You shuffle, and you persist. Plants never stopped being your partners. Flowering plants keep diversifying, writing contracts with bees, wasps, butterflies, and bats. Fruits package bribes for couriers with seeds that will survive a digestive tour and wake up somewhere new. Grasses gather their strength for a later takeover, but their ancestors already tease the menu. Your stomach's chemistry, clever as ever, begins thinking about silica like a puzzle it intends to solve. Forests thicken, thin, and trade species as climates swing. Under their canopies you explore a path lined with branches and bright ideas. Your primate path begins in leaves and daylight mottled like camouflage. You are not yet you, exactly, but you have hands that curl around branches with soft authority, nails instead of claws on the ends of touchy fingers, and forward-facing eyes that pull two images into one deep picture. Depth matters when the ground is a rumor, and the next branch is either there or not there. Mainstream fact. Early primate-like mammals, plesiadapiforms, appear in the Paleocene. By the Eocene, true primates with grasping hands and stereoscopic vision, adapiforms and omomyiforms, flourish in warm forests, their ankle bones and ear regions telling anatomists which team they've joined. You vault and land, and in that metronome, your brain rehearses maps. Historians still argue whether plesiadapiforms belong inside the primate club or just outside the door, whether the ancestral primate was a nocturnal bug gulper or a diurnal fruit connoisseur, whether primates first radiated in Asia and spread west with a carbon-fueled thermal push, or bloomed in Africa and exported their experiments east. They debate whether the Eocene's rich primate gardens were pruned mainly by climate, competition, or both. You listen politely from a branch and continue doing the only experiment that matters to your lineage. Don't fall. The city inside your skull budgets differently now. Smell remains a loyal friend, but vision pays more rent. The parts of the brain that integrate sight and reach, there, plus hand, expand like a favorite room. Social bonds move in and never leave. Grooming becomes currency. Calls and glances become contracts. Faces become books you learn to read for mood, intention, and lunch plans. Quirky tidbit. Somewhere along the way, your line breaks the gene for making vitamin C. The gulo gene retires, which is a funny choice for a creature that sometimes forgets where it put the snacks. Fruit becomes not just pleasure, but necessity, a quiet dietary leash that ties you to leafy markets. Other mammal lines star in parallel epics. On distant islands that rafted when continents quarreled, marsupials rehearse entire food webs with pouches as nurseries. In Australia, they draft analogues for many placental jobs with aplomb. Monotremes, ancient electric-sensing oddballs, lay leathery eggs and remind everyone that history is not linear. A platypus writes its resume in contradictions and gets hired anyway. On Madagascar, a rumor you will one day call a raft floats from Africa loaded with small primates and their insect friends. Lemurs take the island like a secret kept too well and reinvent sociality in perfumes and moonlight. Bodies respond to places. In open woodlands, limbs lengthen and spring. In dense rainforests, ankles loosen, shoulders swivel, and tails become counterweights with opinions. In river corridors, hands learn to sift. In caves, noses volunteer. Bats dream upside down. Whales dream half a brain at a time. Elephants, in futures not yet close, will remember waterholes like libraries. Intelligence is no sudden crown, but a layered habit. Noticing, remembering, predicting, sharing, and doing it together. You practice virtue made from necessity. The canopy is three-dimensional chess at a slow tempo. Your fingers play it without looking. Forward-facing eyes do more than measure jumps. They read friends. A juvenile clings and learns timing by osmosis. An elder finds fruit not by scent, but by map. East Ridge, turn at Strangler Fig, 2 trees past the looped liana. Your hand holds a fruit, your other hand holds a second fruit. A third fruit requires a plan. The simplest tool is a root remembered. The next is a twig used to tease termites. Mainstream fact to nestle near your ear. Bats fossilize wonderfully in the Eocene Green River shales, their wing membranes and tiny finger bones preserved like musical notation. Primate bones with grasping big toes and nails testify on several continents. At Messel in Germany, even soft stomach contents whisper diets, leaves, fruit, beetle bits. The receipts are good. The trend is clear. Forests teach you to think in branches, both literal and metaphorical. Historians still argue whether the big brain came primarily from social complexity, the social brain idea, or from foraging challenges and the need to remember where and when fruit ripens. Whether predation pressure or parental care drove longer childhoods. Whether the earliest anthropoids preferred the understory or the canopy top. They also argue how much climate pulses, like the Eocene-Oligocene cooling and the birth of Antarctic ice, set the tempo of dispersals. The arguments are careful and kind. The answers are probably yes. The old callbacks keep you company even here. Ozone still holds its parasol. The magnetosphere still hums. The moon still writes ladders of silver on rivers you follow at dawn. Boundaries, gradients, snacks. Now they're canopy edges, light shafts, figs in season. Your old patience shows up as a new virtue. You wait quietly for the fruit to soften, for the troop to settle, for the right moment to leap. The laughter of parrots is rude. The gossip of monkeys is non-stop. At night, a bat sketches the same arcs you practiced as a microbe. Question, answer. Some cousins climb down and try the ground more often. Grasslands will widen later and ask for long legs. Not yet. For now, the forest is enough school. Fingers learn to oppose thumbs, not just for clinging, but for fiddling. Eyes learn color again, where it helps pick ripe from almost. Faces learn a dozen expressions that say, "We're fine. We should leave." Share that, and sorry, in combinations that prevent drama and make peace. You recognize yourself in others and remember debts longer than meals. Emotion becomes navigation. Sleep comes lighter and deeper at once. You curl on a branch that bows and lifts with your breath. Somewhere below, a small horse with 4 toes taps through leaves. Somewhere beyond the trees, waves lift the serpent-long back of a whale surfacing to say nothing. In the distance, thunder complains without rain. You hold a twig and doze before you can use it for anything more complicated than balance. Minds do not arrive with trumpets. They thicken like forests. When wind slips through leaves, it sounds a little like the hiss of ancient rain on basalt, and a little like the hush under ice, and a little like the roar of a sauropod forgotten by the sky. You carry all those sounds. You are a primate now, in everything but name. Hands speaking fluent branch, eyes speaking fluent distance, and a brain that begins to enjoy the taste of patterns. You're not leaving the trees tonight. You're learning them by heart so that, when you do, you'll carry their logic into a new kind of ground. The trees keep their cool, emerald conversations, but the world outside them is changing its voice. Seasons grow sharper, rains arrive on new schedules, patches of forest give way to mosaics of woodland and grass, light pooling on the ground in ways branches cannot soften. You, tree-born and branch-competent, climb down more often, shoulder-brushing sunlight like a curtain you didn't mean to open. On the margin between shade and savanna, you try a small adjustment that turns out to be a declaration. You straighten, you balance your head over your hips, and you let your hands go. Bipedal is an elegant way to say you stand. At first it is awkward, and then, abruptly, it is obvious. Hips retool into a bowl. The spine curves like a question mark that already knows the answer. A big toe that once gripped bark aligns with its siblings and learns heel ball toe, heel ball toe. Your arms, once rope and cradle, become liberated generalists, free to carry fruit, a sleeping child, the choicest rock. Mainstream fact: long after you are asleep, a trail at Laetoli in Tanzania will reveal footprints laid in fresh volcanic ash around 3.6 million years ago, toes splayed just enough, the rhythm unmistakable. 2 individuals walking upright together across a morning that still smells like stone. Historians still argue whether bipedalism rides in on energy savings across open ground, on thermoregulation in the noon glare, on the logic of carrying and provisioning, on wading through wetland edges. or on all of these braided together. Whatever the reasons, the consequences are immediate. Standing frees your eyes to read distance, your hands to plot futures, and your breath to coordinate with strides. Jokes to keep the pace human. Your first truly long walk arrives without an itinerary. Your first armload of carried snacks becomes a social innovation. Yes, I brought enough to share, mostly. And once you've stood up, the trees look like old teachers, beloved. But you do not climb the chalkboard anymore. Hands, tired of merely grabbing, begin to ask questions of stone. A gathered cobble becomes a hammer. A flaked edge becomes a tooth you can replace at will. The first older one flakes are simple, sharp surprises struck from cores, but they feel like a secret unlocked. You can shape bites. Later, you discover symmetry and patience. Acheulean hand axes arrive roughly 1.7 million years ago. Teardrops in stone that fit the palm and are beautiful on purpose, even if your inner artist pretends it meant only utility. You butcher, split, dig, scrape, and pass down the knack. Somewhere a juvenile practices and drops a lopsided potato of a hand axe and insists it's abstract art. The clan nods kindly and uses it anyway. Range expands because you can. Your long-legged cousins, Homo erectus, the upright person, lean into distance and leave Africa in waves by nearly 2 million years ago, firelight reflecting in eyes that have learned to search horizons. Fire itself is a slow courtship. Lightning offers raw sparks, and you learn to guard and tend them, until, closer to 1 million years ago in places like Wonderwerk Cave and later at sites across Eurasia, ash, reddened sediment, and charred bone become habitual, not rare. Quirky tidbit to tuck beside your bedroll. Long before recipes, somebody chews birch bark in a low oxygen fire and makes pitch, yes, glue, from trees. Their tooth marks are still impressed in black tar that doubles as the earliest chewing gum with a gossip column's worth of DNA. Evenings gather the tribe, words gather you. First there are gestures and grunts, then more sounds. Then meanings that stretch like leather, then names for things not here, not now. Language is a city built overnight and then endlessly renovated. Its scaffolds, breath control, tongue choreography, shared attention grow in you while you pass food and stories around a tame, persuadable flame. Your larynx drops, your tongue learns agility, your brain makes space. Mainstream fact, the hyoid bone in Neanderthals looks enough like yours to whisper capacity for speech. The FOXP2 gene that tunes motor sequences for vocalization shows a human-specific story. But sentences, those are an emergent property of togetherness, not a single gene's ambition. The family of humans sprawls and braids. In one cave in Siberia, a finger bone and a tooth will carry a genome that announces new cousins, Denisovans, whose faces we do not yet see, but whose DNA still sings in Pacific and Asian peoples. Neanderthals craft sophisticated tools, care for injured kin, and at least sometimes share children with your lineage. Their hearths warm the same sides of caves. Small-bodied Homo floresiensis, hobbits, haunt island forests on Flores, and remind you that evolution loves a local solution. Tiny people leave tiny tools and enormous questions. Your species, Homo sapiens, arises in Africa more than 200,000 years ago, braided from many populations, and later carries seashells and songlines onto every continent but one, then even that. Australia's shores glow with new hearths by at least 50,000, 65,000 years ago, and ice yields a corridor into the Americas tens of millennia later, by coastal canoe and inland steppe. You dress the world with signs that stand for things. Red ochre stains palms and cave walls. Beads made from shells and ostrich eggshells clink softly on wrists. Zigzags appear on engraved ochre at Blombos. A handprint blooms in negative, where you blow pigment around fingers splayed like a starfish of flesh. Hunters carve antler into points. Gatherers weave. Someone ties a knot and remembers what it means. Art is what language looks like when it goes for a walk. Your fire circles become universities. Your elders become libraries with legs. As you move, you carry the old habits forward. Boundaries, gradients, snacks become shelter, trail, and meal. The moon still writes ladders of silver across estuaries where you set nets. The magnetosphere still hums while sparks rise from the fire you tend. Seasons still tilt memories into calendars. You weave grasses into sleeping mats, sew skins with bone needles, and scatter campsites with flint flakes like a comet's tail. On cold nights you press children between warm bodies and tell them the old origin. You were dust, then drops, then cells, then many, then eyes, then steps. You do not know the word abiogenesis, but you know inheritance when it sits at your fire and answers to your face. You grieve too, and remember. A body is carried to a pit. Ochre is sprinkled. A hand rests on a brow for the last time. Historians still argue whether early burials with flowers are intention or accident, whether ritual is luxury or necessity, whether your kind is the only one that tells stories about before and after. They also argue whether the so-called human revolution is a sudden bloom 50,000 years ago, or a long, slow unfurling across hundreds of thousands of campfires. You listen and keep doing the same work you've always done, making tomorrow out of what's here tonight. The last glacial breath exhales. Ice pulls back like curtains. You learn to plant, to herd, to store. Larders that survive winters and feed springs. Villages grow around granaries. Towns grow around wells. Walls rise, and with them new rules, new troubles, new songs. But even here, in the earliest courtyards and along the first streets, you are still the same story. Upright, toolful, talking around a controlled sun. Cities are camps that forgot how to move. The road from hand-axe to handset is winding, but it is one path. Now, at the end of this long walk, you lie in a bed in a room lit by a tamed star you plug into the wall. Your heart beats with iron forged in dead suns. Your bones hold calcium cooked in stellar cores. Your blood remembers oceans. Your lungs remember forests. Your knees remember savannas. Your tongue remembers fire-lit arguments. Your ears remember the hush under ice and the percussion of rain on basalt. Your fingers remember ropes of bark and the edge of flint. You are the unbroken chain, every ancestor enduring winters and winters of luck and skill, braided into a single, breathing present. Your breath is the long echo of creation, shaped into a lullaby by your own soft mouth. You are home. Set the tools down now. The hand-axe, the bow, the pen, the phone. Let the fire dim to coals, aglow like breathing, and feel the room itself begin to exhale. Your shoulders soften, as if the pack you carried all the way from the trees finally slips free and folds itself into the dark. In the quiet, the years line up politely and then blur, long threads drawn through a single bead. You, so that the whole strand rests, at last, against your chest. The sounds fade to gentler versions of themselves. Footsteps of sauropods become the murmur of traffic far away. Rain on Archean basalt becomes the hush of your fan. Waves from an ancient sea turn to your own slow inhale and slower exhale. The moon still writes a pale ladder somewhere outside. You don't need to climb it tonight. The magnetosphere hums, a low reassurance that shields still work while you sleep. Gravity holds the blankets close and remembers your name. Language loosens its buttons and sits with you quietly. Words stop trying to build and simply float, like ash drifting up from an old fire, like spores settling on soft soil. Each breath grows longer, each blink slower, eyes warming at the corners as if dawn, tired of being early, decided to arrive from within. Jokes put on slippers. Doubts take the night off. If a thought knocks at the door, it is only to say, "We can talk tomorrow." In the last light behind your eyes, you stand upright once more. Not to move, just to look, and the whole road looks back with love. Stardust, rain, cells many, sight, land, winter union, bodies, eyes, green, first steps, the long unkindness and the long patience. Thunder steps, and then your steps. All of it arrives here, at this soft bed and this soft breath. The chain holds. The story keeps you. The night is kind.